You're standing on the dock at Southampton, clutching a one-way ticket that costs 2 years of savings, when a thought colder than the April wind knifes through your nerves. What if the food on board is worse than the port stew you've been living on? The RMS Titanic towers above you, shiny, smug, and so enormous it feels less like a ship and more like a floating city that accidentally grew a funnel. You crane your neck, eyes watering from anticipation and coal smoke, and despite the chaos around you, steamer trunks thudding, dock hands shouting, a goat somewhere protesting its unexpected career change, you swear you can already smell dinner. Is that fresh bread or wishful thinking? Your empty stomach refuses to debate. It simply growls a warning loud enough to startle the goat. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. The third-class gangway is a narrow throat of iron, echoing with footsteps in foreign languages that tumble over each other like gamblers' dice. You move with the tide of humanity. 700 hopes, 700 stories, 700 reasons to trade yesterday for something unpronounceably American. A steward in a stiff cap barely glances at your crumpled ticket before waving you toward F-deck. Straight down, all the way aft, he mutters, as if even the directions know their place in the social hierarchy. Still, the corridor is lit by actual electric bulbs, no sputtering oil lamps or wax strips, and the walls are painted a cheerful white that even optimism would call excessive. You half expect the paint to flake and reveal the usual steerage sorrow beneath, but it doesn't. It stays white, daring you to believe in it. Your cabin is a small miracle. 4 bunks, real mattresses, and a wash basin that gleams like a silver promise. You drop your satchel and bounce on the mattress, twice, just to verify that softness still exists for people without titled relatives. Above the bunk, a printed notice lists mealtimes: breakfast 8 a.m., dinner 12:30 p.m., tea 5:30 p.m., 3 meals a day, on schedule. Served hot, you stare until the words blur, your brain trying to translate them into the currency of your old life, where meals appeared whenever someone remembered to boil water. But the printed notice isn't the true invitation. The ship itself beckons. Somewhere up those grand, forbidden staircases, first-class passengers are sipping champagne with names longer than their lifespans. You, however, are magnetized aft and downward toward the third-class dining saloon, because hunger is the great equalizer, and right now it's drumming a tin pot rebellion against the walls of your ribcage. You follow the smell of yeast and boiled root vegetables until the corridor opens like a revelation. The room is vast, long rows of wooden tables bolted to tiled floors, each table flanked by benches polished smooth by hopes exactly like yours. Electric bulbs hang overhead in frosted globes, casting a steady golden glow that makes every plate, every cup, every tired face look gentler than reality. You freeze at the threshold, half convinced you've trespassed into second class. But then you notice the absence of linens, the abundance of children, and a symphony of accents so thick you could spread them on toast. Yes, this is your tribe, the dreamers and desperates united by a shared belief that tomorrow floats somewhere west across the Atlantic. A steward gestures you forward with the bored precision of a man who's pointed 600 newcomers to 600 benches. You slide into place beside a stocky Welsh miner whose forearms look like they could bend horseshoes. Across from you, a Sicilian grandmother kisses a pendant, whispers a prayer, and begins portioning bread as if rationing sunshine. At the far end of the table, 2 Scandinavian lads compare pocket knives and futures with equal intensity. No one asks names. Names matter less than the fact that bowls are arriving. Breakfast, day 1. A ladle of porridge lands in front of you, thick enough to mortar bricks and hot enough to fog spectacles. A triangle of bread, coarse, heroic in its plainness, joins the bowl, accompanied by a sacrificial pat of margarine that tries very hard to impersonate butter. You take your first spoonful and discover it tastes like warmth itself, faintly sweet, studded with raisins that feel like buried treasure. On land, you'd call it ordinary. At sea, with an ocean's uncertainty ahead, it's ambrosia. A jug of tea circulates, sloshing dark liquid that could strip barnacles. You drink anyway, because it sharpens the edges of the morning and gives the porridge a companion. Conversation is minimal. Cutlery and steam do all the talking. By the time the bowls are empty and the bread nothing but crumbs, a bell clangs somewhere aft, summoning the next wave of hungry pilgrims. You stand, throat coated in starch and satisfaction, and file out obediently. The steward wipes the table with a rag that has seen too many miracles in one morning. He doesn't bother shooing you faster. Even here, service carries a faint suggestion of respect. It's unsettling and wonderful. Between meals, the day unfolds like a cramped accordion, exploring narrow passageways that smell of fresh paint and distant coal, leaning against the aft railing where the ship's wake churns white as milk, discovering that the deck at this end tilts just enough to make you feel perpetually a half-degree away from destiny. Lunch, called dinner to keep Edwardian lexicographers employed, arrives quicker than expected. You wedge yourself into a middle shift, the Goldilocks zone between scalding stew and congealed regret. The stew appears in tin tureens, beef if you squint, potatoes if you don't, carrots dissolving like old gossip. Steam swirls upward, curls your hairline, and paints a halo above every head. You scoop aggressively, every bite tastes of salt, pepper, and something that might once have mood. Is it delicious? Not quite. Is it life-affirming? Absolutely, because each spoonful confirms the printed promise on your cabin wall. Hot food, on time, for people who used to eat hope for supper. Bread baskets roam again, unstoppable as tides. Someone starts singing, an Irish folk tune with too many verses, and by the fifth chorus even the Welsh miner hums along, tapping the table in rhythm. Afternoon drifts past in a pleasant fog of coal smoke and cheap soap. You attend a lifeboat drill that feels more theatrical than practical. Surely nothing could sink this palace, not with that confident thrum beneath your boots and the endless blue horizon saluting your arrogance. By 4 o'clock, your stomach begins another slow drum roll. Tea, supper, call it what you like. The final meal of the day promises calm. You re-enter the saloon and find it gentler now. Lights dimmer, voices lower, a collective hush, as if even the children sense evening's fragility. Plates arrive bearing cold meat sliced translucently thin, cheese that crumbles like good intentions, and bread, always bread, your steadfast comrade. There's pickled beetroot flashing purple under the lamplight, and if you're lucky, a dollop of dark jam that tastes faintly of summer, reminding you why you boarded in the first place. You build small open sandwiches, layer upon layer, and chew leisurely while stories unfurl around you. A widow from County Cork describing New York tenements like promised kingdoms, a Norwegian carpenter explaining ice the size of cathedrals back home, a Spanish teenager who insists he will own a shoe shop by 30 or die trying. Between tales you sip tea strong enough to resurrect the dead, letting the tannins braid together the disparate threads of ambition at the table. Full darkness settles outside portals, and the dining saloon breathes a collective sigh. Stewards collect plates with the practiced grace of men timing a magic trick, making emptiness vanish into the galley's maw. You linger, savoring the aftertaste of boiled beet and possibility, reluctant to surrender this bubble of lamplight and human closeness. But bed calls, and tomorrow promises another parade of meals dictated by bells and tides. Back in your cabin, the mattress welcomes you like an old friend. You lie awake for a time, the ship's heartbeat thrumming through the bunk frame. Steady, reassuring, almost maternal. Around you, 3 strangers breathe in staggered rhythms, each dreaming of a different continent. You close your eyes and taste lingering tea on your tongue, feel warmth coiled in your gut, and realize something astonishing. You are content, not because the food was extraordinary, but because it was predictable, hot, and served with a side of dignity you'd forgotten belonged to you. The Atlantic, dark and infinite, presses against the hull, but here inside F-Deck, the Titanic is a bright kitchen of tomorrow. Sleep finds you smiling at the absurd miracle of warm porridge and electric light. Morning will come early, and with it fresh bread, fresh chatter, and another chance to measure hope in ladlefuls. But for now, lulled by engines and distant laughter, you drift off thinking the unthinkable. Maybe third class isn't the bottom after all. Maybe it's the seedbed, simple food, shared tables, and a sky-sized dream overhead, where new lives quietly sprout while no one up in first-class theaters even notices. And with that final thought, You surrender to dreams flavored faintly of raisins and revolution. Morning arrives not with trumpets, but with the gentle rhythm of boots overhead, steam hissing from unseen pipes, and the unmistakable rattle of cutlery being laid out 2 decks above your dreams. You wake before the breakfast bell, eyes crusted with sleep, belly already anticipating the warm embrace of oats and tea, and the air in the cabin carries the subtle perfume of humanity. Soap, coal dust, and something faintly yeasty that whispers, "The bread is baking." You dress quickly, brushing sleep from your shoulders like lint, and follow the scent back toward the dining saloon. It's already buzzing, babies crying, boots scuffing, the low hum of a dozen different prayers muttered into hand-washed sleeves. As you take your seat, the same Welsh miner nods once, his version of a morning greeting. The Sicilian grandmother is already tearing her bread, her movements both sacred and methodical. A new face, a young German boy with shoes 2 sizes too big, slips in beside you, eyes wide with the kind of awe that only survives one night at sea. Breakfast today offers the comforting déjà vu of porridge, slightly runnier than yesterday, but just as warm. The bread is fresher, slightly crustier, and the margarine has somehow developed a buttery arrogance, pretending harder than ever to be something it's not. Tea follows, ladled into thick cups that keep the warmth stubbornly sealed inside. The tea is better today, or maybe your standards have changed. Either way, you sip with the satisfaction of a person who knows they'll eat again in a few hours. That certainty, so rare in the world you came from, is more nourishing than anything on the plate. After breakfast, you drift through the lower decks like a ghost still tethered to its body. There's a gathering near the stairwell, accordion music bouncing off riveted steel, a small circle of children attempting a jig with feet too light to keep rhythm. An Irish teenager plays with a ferocity that suggests he's trying to drown out memory itself. The music spills through corridors, weaving past men reading letters, women darning socks, and newlyweds learning how to whisper dreams in a new language. At mid-morning, there's a hint of salt in the air. Not the ocean's breath, which never quite reaches this deep, but the promise of boiled meat beginning its slow transformation in the galley. The bell for dinner rings at 12:30 sharp, and the saloon fills again with that same sense of organized anticipation. You find your seat without effort now. This is your spot. The bench has memorized the curve of your spine. You've started carving out a life between ladles. Today's dinner: roast beef, boiled potatoes, and a thick gravy that clings to everything it touches like a second skin. There's also cabbage, pale, soft, and strangely comforting. You eat slowly, not out of etiquette, but because it feels like time stretches differently here. Between bites, conversations unfold. The Welshman reveals he left 3 children behind in the Rhondda Valley. The German boy says nothing, but his eyes drink in every word like soup. The Sicilian grandmother blesses the food 3 times, once in thanks, once for safety, and once for something she doesn't name. Someone mentions icebergs. You glance out a small porthole, but there's only sky, bright and eternal, and the blue-gray promise of the Atlantic. You return to your plate. The food is warm, and the ship is whole. That's enough. By late afternoon, the third-class decks take on a kind of unintentional charm. Laundry flutters from ropes strung between vents. Children chase each other through passages too narrow for propriety. A steward passes, carrying a stack of clean linens, and hums a song with no known beginning. You sit with a small group near the aft railing, swapping stories under a sky too wide to hold them all. There's talk of Ellis Island, of sponsors who never wrote back, of dreams scribbled in cramped handwriting on folded paper. One man says he's going to open a bakery. Another says he just wants land, any land, even if it's a swamp. The German boy finally speaks. He says he's going to be a conductor. No one laughs. That's the rule down here. You take each other's futures as seriously as your own. Tea arrives like a soft punctuation mark at the end of this chapter of the day. Cold meats again, ham this time, sliced thinner than honesty, and more cheese. Bread, of course, always bread, but today there's also stewed prunes, their sweetness hidden beneath a suspiciously gelatinous glaze. You try one and are surprised by its tenderness, as though it, too, has made peace with its station in life. There's more conversation during this meal. Laughter flows more freely, like tea refilled without asking. The atmosphere feels lighter now, not careless, but confident. Even the steward seemed to soften, no longer snapping instructions but occasionally nodding or even, God help us, smiling. Afterward, the saloon empties slowly. You linger at the table with the German boy, drawing imaginary routes on the wood grain with your fingertips. You show him where New York is. He shows you where Hamburg used to feel like home. The ship rocks gently beneath you, a reminder that time doesn't pause just because people are getting to know each other. Evening on the Titanic doesn't come all at once. It tiptoes in, brushing the edges of portholes and casting long shadows along riveted walls. You explore the deck again, this time wrapped in a borrowed coat that smells like someone else's story. The cold bites, but not cruelly. You lean on the railing and stare into the void. Somewhere out there are stars, continents, everything you're heading toward, and somewhere behind is everything you've survived. Back in the cabin, the Welshman snores like a steam engine. The Sicilian grandmother has replaced him. She's telling her rosary beads a story in murmured Italian. You take the top bunk, stretch out, and exhale like you've been holding your breath since birth. You're not rich, you're not privileged, you're third class on the Titanic. But tonight, your belly is full, your bed is warm, and for the first time in a long time, the future feels not just possible, but reachable. And that perhaps is the true luxury on this floating empire. Not the crystal chandeliers, not the multi-course feasts, but the silent sturdy belief that tomorrow might actually be better than yesterday. Down in third class, between one ladle of stew and the next slice of bread, people are learning how to believe again. Not in miracles, not in fate, but in themselves. The third morning at sea tastes different. It's not the porridge, they haven't changed the recipe, but something in the air has shifted. The saloon feels a little quieter, as if the voyage has settled into its bones. The nervous excitement of departure is gone, replaced by the rhythmic comfort of routine. People no longer glance around wide-eyed. They know where the salt is. They know who pours the tea best. They've started greeting each other by name. You're one of them now, the same table, the same spoon, the same bread sliced by the same thick-fingered steward, who now gives a small grunt instead of silence. You take it as a good sign. Breakfast includes not just porridge, but a surprise. Small fried slices of salt pork, greasy, curling at the edges, more fat than meat, but hot and crisp and filling. The tea is stronger this morning too, almost bracing. It punches the back of your throat and wakes you faster than cold water. You sip it slowly, watching the steam rise and catch the light like a whisper made visible. A man across the table is whistling a folk tune under his breath. The German boy, who's officially adopted your table now, hums along even though he's never heard the song before. The Welshman passes around a tin of peppermints. He has only 5 left and he gives them away anyway. There's no music playing, no entertainment, no gilded service. Just human kindness being ladled out in silence. You find yourself wondering what the first-class passengers are eating right now. 10 courses, poached eggs from France, china you can see your reflection in. Then you glance down at your tin plate, your sturdy mug, and the still warm crust of bread in your hand. You decide not to care. After breakfast, you step out onto the open section of the third-class deck, permitted during certain hours of the day. The wind greets you like a playful dog, eager, biting, alive. You wrap your coat tighter and lean into it. The ocean is a steel blue stretched to the edge of the earth. No land, no sails, just you, 100 strangers, and the deepest silence you've ever known. It makes the meals feel sacred, somehow, anchoring, like rituals passed down from generation to generation, no matter where you're from or what you've lost. Lunch arrives just past noon. Today's main offering, Irish stew, thick, brown, glorious, the kind that coats your ribs in your memory. Chunks of beef, or something trying very hard to be beef. Carrots soft enough to spread, and potatoes that break apart with the mere suggestion of a spoon. It's ladled out generously. No one leaves the table hungry. A miracle in itself. There's no dessert. This is third class, after all, but someone smuggled in a lemon cake from a steward's cousin working above decks. It's passed quietly, slice by slice, down the table, as if it were contraband. When it reaches you, you break off a piece and let it dissolve slowly on your tongue. The citrus a sharp reminder that life can still surprise you. The German boy eats his with both hands like it might vanish if he hesitates. He grins afterward. You realize it's the first time you've seen him smile without fear behind it. You spend the afternoon helping an older couple write a letter in English. They're Norwegian, and their script is elegant but halting. The husband doesn't speak, just watches the sea through the porthole, his hands still stained with ink and fishing oil. The wife writes slowly, carefully. We are safe. The food is better than we dreamed. You don't correct the grammar. Dinner, when it comes, feels like a celebration, even though no one says why. There's roast mutton tonight, slightly overcooked, a little dry, but the scent alone could make a man weep. Turnips on the side, mashed to near liquid, and peas, soft, rolling, stubborn peas that escape your spoon and land in your lap like mischievous children. The meal is noisier tonight. Laughter echoes louder. Someone starts clapping a rhythm on the table and the sound spreads. Tables joining in one by one until the whole saloon is pounding like a heartbeat. The Sicilian grandmother sings a lullaby, and the music quiets to listen. No one understands the words, but they all nod, knowing. After dinner, you linger, not for the food, but for the presence of others, for the warmth of community, for the rare comfort of being part of something bigger than your hunger. One of the stewards appears with a jug of hot tea and pours extra into your cup without being asked. You say, "Thank you." He shrugs. "Figured you'd want more." That's as close to luxury as you'll get, and it's enough. Later that night, as you lie in bed, you realize you didn't think about America once today. Not the job you're supposed to find, not the name you're supposed to claim, not the future that's waiting like an unopened letter in a language you barely know. Instead, you thought about tea and porridge, and whether you'd sit beside the Welshman again tomorrow, or if the Sicilian grandmother would remember your name. You thought about stew, you thought about cake, you thought about how it feels to eat without shame. And somewhere in the rustle of bunks and the low murmur of evening prayers, you fall asleep smiling. Because here, even in the belly of a ship that wasn't built for dreams, you found something better than gold-plated forks or velvet curtains. You found your people, and somehow they found you too. By the fourth day, the smells alone can tell you what time it is. You wake before the bell, even before the boots begin to pass overhead. The scent of brewing tea drifts through the cracks in the walls. Someone is already stirring oats in a great steel pot. You know without looking that the bread is almost done baking. The yeasty warmth feels like a blanket wrapping the entire deck. You've started moving slower now, not out of fatigue, but out of comfort. The chaos of boarding is long past. Your body has adjusted to the rhythm of the sea, and your mind has adjusted to the idea that this, however temporary, is a kind of home. You step into the saloon and find your place with ease. The same bench, the same chipped plate, the same Welshman across from you who now grumbles a morning that could almost be mistaken for affection. The Sicilian grandmother pinches your cheek like you're one of her own. The German boy yawns so loudly it startles a toddler nearby. Breakfast is familiar, porridge again, but there's a kind of reverence to it now. No one complains, no one asks for more. Each bite is taken with a quiet that feels less like silence and more like gratitude. You finish your cup of tea and catch yourself wishing you had a second one, not because you're thirsty, but because the warmth feels like company. After breakfast, the day stretches out ahead like a sea with no shore. You take your time walking the corridors, nodding to faces you now recognize. There's a young Swedish woman teaching children to count in English using buttons from her coat. A Scottish carpenter mending a splintered bunk with scraps from a crate. A Spanish man scribbling in a notebook, always watching, always writing, each person carrying their own quiet history across the Atlantic, held together with threadbare clothes and full bellies. Lunch comes earlier than expected, beef and vegetable soup today, thicker than usual, nearly a stew. The broth clings to your spoon, savory and hot. There are dumplings in it too, fluffy and uneven, probably made in haste, but they soak up the flavor perfectly. A slab of bread follows, and you dip it into the broth like you've been doing it your whole life. It's the kind of meal that doesn't just feed you, it repairs you. Afterward, you and the German boy head toward the stern. The sea is calm today. The sky, gray and endless, presses low on the horizon. The wind tugs at your sleeves and whispers things you can't quite understand. You don't speak for a while. You just listen. Eventually, he asks you what kind of food you miss most. You think about it longer than expected, then you say, fresh apples, picked straight from the tree. He nods. For me, sauerkraut and real rye bread. With the seeds, neither of you says anything more. Because sometimes food isn't just food. It's a place, a person, a time you wish you could touch again. Dinner that evening is the last you'll have without knowing it. Boiled fish with white sauce, cod, you think, soft and flaky, mashed turnips, a small scoop of rice pudding to finish. It's one of the better meals, not fancy, not even spiced, but thoughtfully made. The kind of meal that tells you someone, somewhere, cared. The saloon is livelier than usual tonight. A group of Irish men have fashioned instruments from nothing. An empty tin, a string from a crate, a spoon against a mug. Music spills into the air like candlelight. Laughter follows. The Sicilian grandmother dances a slow circle with a toddler. The Welshman sings a song in his native tongue, eyes glistening as he forgets himself. The German boy claps along, offbeat but earnest. You hum under your breath, letting the sound fill the spaces between your bones. It's late when the music ends. People drift off in pairs and small clusters. Good nights are exchanged, prayers whispered, blankets tucked. Someone coughs in the far bunk. A baby fusses. The ship hums steadily beneath it all. You lie in bed and think about tomorrow, about what you'll eat, about what you'll say, about what it might feel like to stand on land again. But mostly, you think about how strange it is to feel so much in a place that costs so little. You remember the stories, how third class would be hellish, how the poor were packed like animals, but you found something different. Not glamorous, no, not easy, but decent, dignified, human. You've had real meals, shared with real people, served by tired hands that didn't turn you away. You've laughed, you've cried, though only once and only when no one was looking. You've tasted a kind of peace that doesn't need linen napkins or silver forks to feel full. And for that, you are quietly, deeply thankful. The lights are dim in the hallway. The ship creaks gently like an old lullaby. You pull your blanket higher, listening for the familiar sounds. Boots passing overhead, someone snoring in rhythm, the ocean tapping the steel hull like a distant drum. You don't know what waits ahead. Ellis Island, crowded boarding houses, a city that might not welcome you. But tonight, none of that matters. Because tonight, you are here. Warm, federal, and not alone. Third class on the Titanic wasn't a prison. It wasn't misery. It was life in all its raw, beautiful simplicity. Bread, soup, laughter, a lullaby in a language you don't speak, and a seat at the table you never thought you'd find. That, in the end, was enough. You've probably stared at your own skin once or twice, an evening lamp glowing soft, the quiet hum of a ceiling fan overhead, and wondered why it looks the way it does, why it stays so resolutely blank while billions of others throughout history chose to mark theirs forever. Imagine that blankness dissolving, just for a moment, into stories written in ink you can never wash away. That first flutter of curiosity is our gateway tonight, and together we'll drift back through centuries where needles, soot, and simple courage met beneath lantern light. The oldest human ever found with tattoos lies sealed beneath glass in a refrigerated chamber in Bolzano, Italy. Though he began his long sleep on an alpine glacier more than 5,000 years ago. They call him Ötzi, the Iceman, and if you could step quietly into that chilled room, you'd see dark blue dashes and crosses etched along his ankles, behind his knees, around his lower spine. They look almost accidental, like someone absent-mindedly pressed a charcoal stick against damp parchment. Yet they sit precisely on the places where joints ache, where a spine throbs, map pins in the geography of pain. Scientists debate motive, medicine, ritual, or simply a Stone Age fashion statement, but the tattoos remain silent, their pigment made from soot, their purpose entombed in a language long forgotten. Imagine the scene, a small alpine clearing, dawn's gray hush. A fire snaps low and steady, its smoke absorbed by pines. Ötzi sits on a flat rock, legs stretched, while another man, friend, healer, or both, grinds charcoal and tree resin into a paste. A sharp bone sliver taps the skin, faint rhythm of woodpecker on bark. Blood beads, dries, disappears beneath fresh ash. No ceremony, no grand incantations, only the steady commitment to mark flesh in the hope it might hurt less tomorrow. It is, in its own quiet way, an act of faith. Faith that pain can be redirected, that skin can be convinced to remember something other than ache. When the work is done, the healer rinses the wound with melted snow. Utsi stands, flexes, tests his ankle. The joint still complains, but the new lines say, I acknowledge you, pain. I have drawn borders around you. Stay there. Thousands of miles and a few millennia away, the banks of the Nile glow gold beneath an unflinching sun. In Thebes, artisans scrape soot from oil lamps, mix it with milk and madder root, then load the slurry into tiny bronze needles bound with linen twine. Their client is not a pharaoh but a priestess, her arms already threaded with patterns that twist like river reeds. She sits upright, breathing steadily, while the tattooist leans close. A drone of cicadas hums outside. Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, a scribe lectures a class of boys in formal hieratic. Inside, the sharp tap-tap of metal on flesh answers each buzzing note, as though the priestess's own skin has joined the chorus. Egyptian tattoos belong mostly to women, dancers, priestesses, midwives, marked on chest, thighs, and belly in dense nets of dots that swell and shift when they move. Some scholars call them amulets against infertility, others see a living billboard for divine favor. But if you sat beside the priestess as dusk settled, you'd notice something simpler. The way she rests her palm on the freshly inked lattice, eyes closed, lips whispering thanks. She doesn't need scholars. She knows why she chose this pain. She knows the hush that arrives once a needle finishes its final puncture. The hush where yesterday's fear ends and tomorrow's resilience begins. Far to the east, under the rising smoke of backyard hearths in the village of Ukikamui on Hokkaido, the Ainu people practice a different form of needlework. Here, the skin of womanhood is incomplete until it bears a mouth that was never born, an oval tattoo stretching from lower lip to chin. A child receives the first faint outline around her 10th year. Tiny soot scratches that itch like curious insects. Over seasons, the oval thickens, the color darkens, layer upon layer, until a bride stands at her wedding with a second smile painted bold upon her face. The Ainu say these mouth tattoos trick evil spirits who might otherwise slip between a woman's lips. Others claim the mark is a passport through the gates of the afterlife, proof of belonging in the world beyond the smoke of the hearth. Imagine the final sitting. Winter has weighed the sky low and pewter. The hearth sparks amber light across the one-room house, fur pelts muffling every draft. The mother kneels before her grown daughter, gently stretches the skin and taps tiny birchwood needles dipped in soot. No hurry. The house smells of cedar and bear fat. Outside, snow accumulates without sound. Each tap writes a syllable only ancestors can read. When the tattoo is finished, the mother presses warm moss soaked in medicinal herbs against the swelling. The daughter doesn't wince. She's practiced this acceptance year after year. Later, when she cups her face to warm frost-stung cheeks, her palms touch not just skin but the echo of mothers and grandmothers, an unbroken lineage stitched in charcoal thread. To the south, Polynesian navigators spot land by reading waves. They read skin with equal fluency. On the island of Samoa, the tatau is a scripture spread across the body, meticulously carved by a comb-shaped bone dipped in candlenut soot. The ritual spans weeks. Each session ends not with applause but with silence, as raw skin is salved with scented oil of niu, and the recipient limps home to sleep on woven mats that scratch precisely where new patterns burn. The tatau is not a single story but a library. Curved bands for courage, triangles for lineage, dense black panels near the waist to anchor the soul. Men endure full pia, from ribs to knees, while women wear the malu, lines delicate as spiderwebs dancing beneath the knees. In a thatched fail open to ocean breezes, a young man lies face down. His brothers support his shoulders. His father kneels by his head, murmuring genealogy. The tufuga, master tattooist, dips the bone comb again, then strikes with a mallet carved from breadfruit wood. The comb's teeth bite pigment beneath the dermis. The mallet's song is a metronome for pain. There is no anesthesia, only coconut husk smoke curling toward rafters heavy with salted air. Flies hover, drawn by iron-rich scent, shooed away by attendants waving fronds. Days pass like pages in a slow book. When finally the tatau closes its ring around the thighs, the young man stands, supported by brothers, steady despite trembling. He wears an ocean on his legs, a map of obligation and pride. Each step tomorrow will ache, but each ache will remind him how to stand taller. The The Scythians of the Eurasian steppe prefer their ink bright and boastful. They distill pigments from crushed berries and copper oxide, then chase them beneath skin with iron needles heated red hot. Their favorite canvas, warriors' arms, necks, and sometimes faces, ferocious cats, antlered stags leaping over sinew, serpents curling down biceps. Herodotus claims the tattoo is a medal of honor. Only nobles dare carry such banners in flesh. But in the smoky twilight of a wool-felt yurt, the line between noble and herdsman blurs under the steady hand of the ink giver. Two warriors sit bare to the waist, trading stoic silence as needles pierce. Outside, horses stamp impatiently. They smell distant battle, but inside, the true fight is happening here, between nerve and resolve. When the session ends, the men clasp arms, blood mingling with ink, their new beasts already snarling through swollen skin. Ancient China holds its own inked legends, though their tattoos often sit uneasily between exile and honor. The word siyu spells both punishment and ornament, depending on era. In the Warring States period, a soldier might brand himself with the emblem of his lord, a tiger across the back perhaps, to declare unbreakable loyalty. Yet decades later, the same mark could condemn a thief, inked characters across his cheek telling every passerby that his crime is public property. In the humid dusk of a Yangtze River port, a fisherman with dragon scales etched around his forearms hauls nets heavy with carp. Shopkeepers glance, children whisper, but no official calls him criminal. The empire's mood has shifted again. Tattoos are merely shadows now, too old to indict, too familiar to praise. The fisherman just smiles, water dripping off beard and elbows, scales glistening dragon blue beneath lantern light. Across the Atlantic, long before conquistadors redraw maps in iron and fire, the Maya of Yucatan tap obsidian slivers into skin moistened with roasted plantain peel. Jade green pigment pools in shallow bowls, flecked with powdered malachite, patterned spiral along forearm and calf, glyphs announcing lineage, jaguar, corn, serpent, rain. The process begins after a ritual sweat bath. Pores open, the spirit softened by heat and chanting. In the shade of a ceiba tree, a novice breathes through clenched teeth while the Atsib, tattoo priest, punctures methodically. 1, 2, 3, wiping away blood with woven cotton. When the sun reaches its zenith, the session pauses, pigments covered to keep from drying. The novice drinks a toll thick with cacao to steady his stomach. Ink and maize mix in his mouth. Reminder that nourishment and pain often share a bowl. By sunset, swollen arms bear new glyphs, still shining wet. Tonight he will sleep face up beneath starlight, cradling sore limbs, hearing jaguars moan in distant jungle, brothers in fresh-cut skin. All these traditions share a quiet arithmetic. Skin plus soot equals story. The formula never hurries. Needles tap slowly. Pigment seeps, blood rises, scabs form, flake, lift, and leave behind a memory you can touch. The math of permanence feels almost merciful in a world where everything else dissolves. Riverbanks erode, empires fall, songs forget their own melodies. But a tattoo persists, stubborn as a promise. Tonight, as you lie half cocooned in blankets, imagine each needle strike as a metronome guiding centuries toward dreamtime. Tap, breathe, tap, exhale. Utzi's bone tool clicks against alpine silence. The Egyptian bronze needle answers with a soft ring. In Samoa, the mallet sets the tempo, deeper, slower, like a heart teaching itself to sleep. Thousands of rhythms overlap until they become one vast hush. A hush thick enough to float you across eras without effort, like driftwood riding a moonlit tide. In that hush, you might feel your own pulse negotiating with memory. What you've chosen to mark, what you've left blank. Maybe there's a freckle on your arm shaped like a tiny crescent. Maybe there's a scar no one else notices but you trace during storms. These are tattoos of circumstance, born without ink, proof that the skin is already a palimpsest long before needles arrive. So let the story settle now, like pigment sinking beneath a final layer of skin. The fire has burned down to embers in Utzi's camp. The Nile breeze cools the priestess's fresh lattice. The Ainu mother blows gently across her daughter's swelling chin. Polynesian waves lap against outrigger canoes drawn high on the sand. Warriors sleep on mats, new tattoos shining oily under half-closed eyes. Somewhere on the steppe, a Scythian horse nickers beneath constellations that look suspiciously like the beasts inked on its rider's shoulder. In the Yangtze port, a fisherman snores beside empty nets, dragons coiling with every rise of his chest. And in a Maya clearing, nocturnal birds trill around a novice who dreams in jade. All of them are breathing slowly as you are, and their ink, though ancient, remains unblinking. You awaken slowly, drifting along the memory of needles and ash, the scent of fire and skin still lingering like a faint shadow. We're far from the ice of the Arctic now. The wind has shifted, the air feels thick with jungle heat, damp with humidity, buzzing with insects and the quiet hush of leaves swaying like breath. It's here, in the dense forests and riverways of what we now call Southeast Asia, that the ancient art of tattooing has flourished for millennia. The fire crackles low, the night is hot, and seated in a circle of silence, lit by ember light and ancestral eyes, a young man prepares to receive his first tattoo from an elder who has tattooed 3 generations before him. There are no machines here, no sterile tables, only sharpened sticks, soot made from burned bark, and threads of banana fiber soaked in lemon juice. The tools are older than language. He sits still, arms resting on his knees, eyes closed as the tapping begins, a soft, rhythmic tick-tick-tick-tick-tick that settles into your chest like a heartbeat. Each mark, each dot is not simply decorative. It is a story, a protection, a symbol of rank, of manhood, of survival. It's not done quickly. Sometimes it takes days. A single session might last 5 hours, with breaks only when the pain makes the air shimmer. But the pain isn't punishment, it's a right, a requirement to carry meaning. In Borneo, among the Kayan and Iban peoples, these tattoos, known as ukir, once mapped out a person's entire journey through life. A man might have tattooed rosettes on his shoulders to mark headhunting victories, while intricate lines spiraled down the thighs of women, symbols of beauty and fertility. For the Iban, tattoos were intimately tied to spiritual protection. The throat, the fingers, the back of the neck, each location had meaning, and each design worked like armor against unseen forces. It was believed that spirits could be tricked or even repelled by the sight of certain patterns. The more tattoos you had, the better your chances in the afterlife. The tools themselves were sacred. Tattooing combs, called sundu, were made from pieces of bone or horn affixed to short wooden handles. They were dipped in ink, then tapped gently into the skin using a second stick to create a percussive motion. It sounds simple, even serene, but the ink had to be just right, thick with soot and bile to darken permanently, and the angle had to be perfect. One mistake, and the line blurred or scarred unevenly. And yet, no one rushed. These were not acts of vanity, they were commitments. A man's chest was not tattooed because it looked good. It was tattooed when he proved himself worthy. A woman's arms were not inked for beauty alone. They were adorned when she mastered weaving or childbirth or some skill that earned her the respect of her peers. In this world, to wear tattoos was to speak a language of accomplishments visible to all. We move through time like river water, slowly, with bends and eddies. The forest gives way to ocean, and we follow the tide into the Pacific, whereas tattooing took on another form, both similar and strikingly unique: Polynesia. The very word tattoo comes from this part of the world, from tatau, a word in Tahitian, Samoan, and Tongan languages, meaning to strike. And oh, how they struck. The process was more elaborate here, more ritualized, often involving entire villages in the making of a single tattoo. In Samoa, for instance, the male tattoo, the pea, covered the body from mid-torso to knees. Imagine that. Days, weeks, sometimes even months of tapping delicate designs into the thighs, hips, and abdomen, without anesthetic, without pause. The master tattooist, the Tufugata Tatau, held immense power. He was more than an artist. He was a priest, a guardian of tradition. To train as a tufuga took decades, and the position was passed down within families, father to son, in secrecy. Tools were sacred heirlooms, combs carved from bone or turtle shell, ink made from the soot of burnt candle nuts, sharpened sticks hardened in fire. When a young man was ready, he was not just choosing a tattoo. He was choosing to enter a lifelong contract with his culture. The PO wasn't just a symbol of adulthood, it was a visible testament to his endurance, his loyalty, and his discipline. To start the process and fail to complete it, well, that was unthinkable. The shame of a half-done PO was so great that many would rather endure agonizing pain than live with unfinished ink. And the pain was real. The tapping didn't stop for your cries or your tears. The design was complex. Bands of diagonal lines, triangular motifs, curved paths like fish hooks and waves. The tufuga had assistants who would stretch the skin taut while he worked. The tapping echoed like a soft drum, relentless and steady. Women were tattooed too, but their designs, called malu, were smaller, more delicate. Still, they held immense cultural weight. To wear a malu on one's thighs was to walk with grace, to live with modesty, to belong. It was not decorative. It was a statement seen only in certain moments, known only to certain people. In Polynesia, tattoos were cosmology etched into skin. Every mark had a story. A spiral might represent a journey across the sea, a line of triangles, a family lineage, a fish hook, the bounty of the ocean. These were not random motifs, they were maps of the soul, and they were often read aloud. An elder might trace a young man's tattoo and recite his heritage, his deeds, his name. And while these tattoos looked timeless, they were also deeply current. Designs were adjusted, changed, added to as a person's life unfolded. They were not frozen moments, they were living manuscripts. We travel again, west now, toward the deserts of ancient Egypt, where the sun bleaches bone and time moves slowly. Here, tattooing took a quieter form, subtler but no less meaningful. The earliest evidence of Egyptian tattoos dates back to around 2000 BCE, though some argue they appeared even earlier. Mummies found in tombs, especially women, have revealed faint patterns on their skin, dotted lines and symbolic shapes inked in a dark pigment, preserved through centuries of dry sand and silence. One of the most famous examples is Amunet, a priestess whose body was unearthed at Thebes. Her tattoos consisted of lines and dots arranged in geometric patterns on her arms, her legs, her abdomen. Scholars once assumed they were merely decorative, but closer study suggests otherwise. The placement of the tattoos, especially on the stomach and thighs, suggests they may have been related to fertility, childbirth, or protection during pregnancy. Imagine then a woman walking through the temple complex at Karnak, her skin marked with symbols meant to guard her womb, to protect her unborn child. Each tattoo, a prayer written in pigment. Perhaps she received them in adolescence, perhaps after her first child. We don't know her name, but we know she carried her beliefs with her, beneath her robes, beside her bones. Interestingly, Egyptian tattoos were seemingly exclusive to women for centuries. There's very little evidence of men being tattooed in the same period, which suggests a gendered cultural role for the practice. These weren't trophies of war or badges of status. They were spiritual, intimate, possibly medical. Later in Greco-Roman Egypt, the practice expanded. Tattoos began to appear on both genders, often linked to specific cults or gods. A devotee of Isis might bear the goddess's name or symbol on their arm or chest, a permanent declaration of faith. The tools were rudimentary, needles, probably bronze or bone, and pigments made from soot, ash, or ground minerals mixed with water or oils. The process, as always, was painful. The skin had to be pierced over and over, then soot rubbed in to darken the wounds. Healing took weeks, but the result lasted a lifetime. Tattooing in Egypt wasn't just an art, it was a rite, a ritual, a thread woven into religion, medicine, and womanhood, and it was done quietly, away from the spectacle of public ritual. You wouldn't see a woman's tattoos unless you were close to her, unless she allowed you in. As the Nile winds north, our journey turns toward the ancient Middle East, where inked flesh took on another role altogether. In Mesopotamia, Assyria, and Persia, tattoos appear in the historical record, but often as marks of control rather than celebration. Slaves, prisoners, and criminals were sometimes tattooed with symbols of ownership or punishment. Names, phrases, or curses inked into the forehead or hand. These were not marks of pride, they were marks of shame, and yet, even within these darker chapters, you can sense the power of the tattoo. It was permanent, it was visible, it changed a person forever. Whether for protection or punishment, ritual or revenge, ink had the power to redefine a body, to reshape its story. And maybe that's the quiet thread running through all these ancient traditions. Whether done in love or law, in joy or grief, tattoos were never meaningless. They were statements etched deep into the self, a blend of pain and pride, permanence and passage. As the night deepens and the embers begin to fade, we leave these ancient lands behind. But the stories remain, still pulsing, still warm beneath the skin. Time drifts again, like smoke curling from a ceremonial fire, and now the landscape shifts. The desert winds soften, and a new kind of silence settles in. Drier, older, almost forgotten. We've arrived in the heart of the Eurasian steppes, among people who moved with the seasons, who lived in felt tents and rode sturdy horses across frozen plains. These were the Scythians, nomadic warriors who tattooed their dead. In the highlands of modern-day Russia, in a place called the Altai Mountains, permafrost has preserved their secrets. One of the most haunting discoveries was the mummified body of a Scythian warrior, found buried beneath layers of ice. His skin, still intact after more than 2,500 years, was covered in tattoos, snarling beasts with spiraling antlers, claws, and wings, fantastical animals that seemed ready to leap from his flesh. The designs weren't random. They were deliberate, ornate, layered with meaning. Scholars believe they may have symbolized power, identity, spiritual guardianship. Perhaps they told stories of the man's lineage. Perhaps they were warnings. Or maybe they were part of a ritual that helped guide him into the afterlife, where he would need strength, cunning, and protection. The Scythians weren't alone. Their neighbors, the Pazyryk people, also tattooed their dead. In one frozen tomb, a woman was found, wrapped in red felt and furs. Her arms and shoulders were covered in delicate inked lines. Deer, panthers, strange goat-like creatures, all interwoven with curling tails and graceful antlers. Her tattoos, like those of the warrior, were not simply body art, they were talismans. We don't know how the tattoos were made, but they likely used fine bone or bronze needles and ink made from soot or crushed charcoal, rubbed into freshly pierced skin. The tools were basic, the symbolism was not. To the Pazyryk, tattoos seemed to hold power beyond life. The dead were prepared with care, tattooed, dressed, honored. It's possible that the tattooing process was one of the final rites, a ceremonial closing of the life cycle. In this tradition, tattoos were not just memories, they were escorts. Even here, in a place where winters stretch endlessly and wolves stalk the edges of the campfire light, the skin told stories. The lines, now frozen in time, continue to whisper. From the cold mountains, we move southeast into the rich, cultural terrain of China. And here, tattooing takes on a very different tone. Unlike many of the cultures we've visited so far, ancient Chinese society generally viewed tattoos with suspicion and disdain. Confucian teachings placed great emphasis on honoring one's body, a gift from one's parents. To alter or mark the skin was often considered an offense, a sign of disrespect, so tattooing was pushed to the margins. It wasn't celebrated, it was stigmatized, and yet it never disappeared. Among criminals, tattoos were often used as punishment. A character would be carved and inked into the forehead or cheek of a thief, a traitor, a rebel. These were called Ci Pei, literally ink punishment. The mark was permanent. It labeled the person for life. Everyone could see it, everyone would know. It wasn't just physical, it was social exile. But beyond the cities, far from the imperial courts in the mountainous regions of southern China, tattooing persisted in a different form, quietly preserved by ethnic minority groups like the Dulong, the Li, and the Dai. Among the Dulong, for example, facial tattooing was a rite of passage for women. At around age 12 or 13, girls would receive their tattoos, a series of symmetrical blue-black patterns carved around the cheeks and forehead. It was painful. There was no numbing agent. The ink was made from soot mixed with water or pig fat. Needles were made from bamboo or fish bone, but the girls endured it, often without crying, because the tattoos carried meaning. They were signs of maturity, beauty, and belonging. Why the face? Some say the tradition began as a way to make women less desirable to invading armies, to protect them from being taken. Others argue it was always about cultural pride, an outward declaration of identity. Either way, the practice was passed down for centuries. The patterns varied by clan. Each line held lineage. Each curve spoke of ancestors. And while the dominant Han culture might have looked down on tattooing, these groups carried it forward with quiet determination. For them, tattooing wasn't shameful, it was sacred. Another group, the Li people of Hainan Island, practiced full-body tattooing among women, spiral patterns running from ankles to neck, sometimes completed over many years. The pain was intense. The process could take weeks, but the result was a deeply respected visual language, unique to each woman. Here, tattoos were part of courtship, of social status, of cultural pride. They weren't hidden, they weren't feared. They were worn like woven cloth stitched in ink. As dynasties rose and fell and empires expanded, these tattoo traditions persisted, quietly, in valleys and villages, far from the gaze of scholars and scribes. And even now, though many of the practices have faded, the stories remain, etched in photographs, oral histories, and in the fading ink of elders' skin. Now, let's travel west again, toward the islands of Japan. In early Japanese history, tattooing was both admired and reviled. Archaeological evidence suggests that as far back as 10,000 BCE, people of the Jomon period practiced some form of body marking, possibly as part of shamanic rituals or social identity. But over time, the perception of tattoos changed dramatically. By the 7th century CE, Chinese influence and Confucian ideals began to shift Japanese views on tattooing. Like in China, tattoos increasingly became associated with criminals and outcasts. Marks were used to punish or brand offenders, a character inked on the arm or forehead to label them for life. But beneath this stigma, other traditions quietly survived. Among the Ainu people of northern Japan, the indigenous group native to Hokkaido and parts of Sakhalin, tattooing held powerful ceremonial meaning, particularly for women. Girls would begin receiving tattoos around the lips and hands from a young age. Over time, the designs would grow, framing the mouth in dark, curved lines that gave the appearance of a permanent smile. The process was painful. The skin was cut with knives or sharpened bamboo, and soot rubbed into the wounds. The tattoos marked a girl's growth into womanhood and were believed to protect her from evil spirits. They also prepared her for marriage and childbirth, offering spiritual guidance and strength. By the time an Ainu woman reached adulthood, her tattoos told the story of her life, her age, her clan, her resilience. And when she died, they guided her spirit to the afterlife. But under increasing pressure from the Japanese government, these practices were suppressed. In the Meiji period, tattooing was banned outright. Practitioners were arrested, the knowledge faded. Only a few elders survived to pass on the memories. And yet, in the shadows, new tattoo traditions emerged. In the Edo period, around the 18th century, Japanese tattooing experienced a strange and beautiful rebirth, not among indigenous tribes, but among artists, firemen, laborers, and eventually, criminals. The style was bold, detailed, epic, known as irizumi. These tattoos often covered the entire back, arms, and thighs with elaborate scenes from folklore, mythology, or nature. Dragons coiled across spines, koi fish swam up arms, peonies bloomed across ribs. It was storytelling on skin, intricate, layered, lush with symbolism. These tattoos weren't visible in everyday life. They were meant to be hidden beneath clothing, revealed only in private or among fellow enthusiasts. The designs could take years to complete, and were done by hand using wooden handles and sharpened needles, dipped in charcoal-based ink. The technique was slow, painful, and expensive, but the result was astonishing. Irizumi became a way to express defiance, identity, even spiritual protection. Firefighters in Edo wore them as talismans. Laborers used them to declare loyalty to their trade, and eventually the Yakuza, the Japanese criminal underworld, adopted them as symbols of strength, secrecy, and belonging. To this day, Irizumi carries both beauty and stigma. In modern Japan, many public places still forbid visible tattoos, and yet the art endures. Quiet, defiant, beautiful. From ice to jungle, mountain to island, tattoos have taken on countless meanings: blessing, punishment, protection, pride. They've been hidden beneath robes, celebrated in public ritual, inked in silence and ceremony. They are pain made permanent, memory made visible. Flesh turned story, but we still have more to explore, more patterns to trace, more ink to follow. So rest for a moment. Let the hum of the world slow down. The next chapter waits just around the corner. You wake to warmth now, not fire, not sun, but something ancient and comforting, like the touch of sand-worn stone after sunset. The earth is dry and red. The wind is slow and thoughtful. You're in Africa, and here, beneath a sky older than memory, tattoos are more than markings. They are time itself, carried in ink and scar. We begin in Nubia, where the Nile once carved life into desert. Archaeologists have uncovered mummies from 2000 BCE with tattoos, dots and symbols not unlike those found farther north in Egypt. But here, the practice seemed more widespread, possibly even more spiritual. Women bore tattoos on their bellies, their arms, their thighs. Some researchers believe these were protective, especially during pregnancy or childbirth. Others think they were tied to ritual, music, or status. Whatever the truth, the ink was permanent, made of soot or crushed minerals, applied with fine needles or sharp thorns. The pain, like always, was part of the process, a necessary threshold, and this wasn't unique to Nubia. Among the Berber people of North Africa, tattooing has existed for thousands of years. The lines were thin, geometric, crosses, stars, and shapes that look simple but hold deep meaning. They mark the forehead, chin, hands. A Berber woman's tattoos spoke of her tribe, her marital status, her spiritual beliefs. Some were meant to confuse evil spirits, others called down blessings. Still others marked key life events, birth, womanhood, grief. The process was intimate. A grandmother or elder would mix the ink, often from soot, blood, or indigo, and prick it into the skin using a palm thorn. There were songs, stories, laughter, and pain in equal measure. And afterward, silence, while the wound healed and the ink became part of the self. But even here, tattoos became vulnerable to change. With the spread of Islam through North Africa, tattooing fell under suspicion. Some religious interpretations discouraged it, others outright banned it. Over time, the ancient marks faded. Fewer girls received them. The old women, with their lined faces and inked chins, became living museums, last bearers of an unbroken chain stretching back centuries. Still, some traditions survive, in hidden corners, in quiet villages, in memory. We move farther south now into the heart of West Africa, where tattooing blended with another powerful form of skin marking, scarification. Among the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Akan, and many other groups, tattoos and scars coexisted, layered in meaning. Where tattoos used pigment, scarification used raised skin, but both told stories. Children received their first marks young, a line on the cheek, a star on the chest. These weren't punishments, they were signs of identity. They told the world who you were, where you came from, and who your people were. In places without passports or written records, the skin itself became your document. And for adults, more intricate marks followed. When a woman married, when a boy became a man, when someone joined a secret society. These were deep cuts, made with blades or broken glass, filled with ash or ink to darken them. The healing process was long, sometimes dangerous, but the scars that formed were prized. Some designs were bold, spirals on the forehead, sweeping arcs across the belly. Others were subtle, tucked beneath arms or hidden near the spine. In every case, the meaning was personal, cultural, spiritual, and though tattooing with pigment was less common than scarification, it still existed, especially in regions where Islamic or colonial influence was weaker. Among the Fulani, for instance, women sometimes tattooed their lips and gums black, a symbol of beauty and strength. It was painful, the ink was bitter, but the result was stunning and considered desirable. And yet again, these practices have faded in recent decades. Laws, religion, colonialism, globalization, all these forces push the ancient traditions to the edge. Still, in some places, they remain, in ceremony, in memory, in old photographs tucked into wooden drawers. Now the wind turns one final time, and we journey east, across sea and sand, to the lands of the Americas. Here, long before European arrival, tattooing was practiced by dozens, perhaps hundreds of indigenous groups, each with its own tools, methods, and meanings. In the cold north, among the Inuit and Yupik, tattooing was closely tied to gender, spirituality, and survival. Women bore fine lines on their cheeks, chins, and foreheads, delicate marks applied with sinew threads soaked in soot and drawn through the skin like embroidery. Each line marked an achievement: first menstruation, marriage, childbirth. But it was more than personal. These tattoos connected a woman to her ancestors, to the land, to the spirits. Men, too, were tattooed, often on their arms or torsos, sometimes as protection in hunting or warfare. The process was quiet, intentional, woven into the fabric of life. Farther south, among the Mississippian peoples and the tribes of the southeastern U.S., tattooing was practiced using bone needles and plant-based pigments. Designs included animals, celestial symbols, clan emblems. They marked warriors, priests, leaders. The Spanish chroniclers who arrived in the 16th century were startled to find native men and women covered in tattoos, lines that glittered with meaning, ink that resisted conquest. In Central America, the Maya and Aztec cultures also practiced tattooing, though much of what we know is speculative, filtered through colonial texts. Still, there's evidence of ritual tattoos given to warriors and priests, using obsidian blades and soot-based ink. The pain was seen as an offering, a necessary part of devotion. Blood, after all, was sacred. Among the Amazonian tribes of South America, tattooing and body painting existed side by side. The designs were striking: black bands, jagged lines, dots that moved with the muscle. They were applied with thorns or sharp fish bones, using ink made from jenapap or charcoal. These weren't decorative. They protected against spirits, told of battles, marked time. A young boy might receive his first tattoo after his first hunt, a girl after her first moon cycle. Adults added more throughout life, each one tied to a story, an event, a promise. And yet, as with so many other places, these traditions were suppressed. Missionaries discouraged them. Governments outlawed them. In some regions, entire languages of ink were lost within 2 generations. Still, they lingered. In dreams, in song, in the quiet pride of a grandmother's shoulder. And now, finally, we return to the present. The hum of machines, the buzz of the modern tattoo gun, a shop lit by fluorescent light, clean gloves, ink and rainbow rose. Today, tattoos are everywhere. On skin once forbidden, on faces once blank. In cities, on beaches, in offices and homes. They're fashionable, they're political, they're art. But even now, beneath all the trend and flash, the old meanings persist. That tiny anchor on someone's wrist, maybe it's just for style. Or maybe it echoes the sailor's ink of centuries past, marks that guided lonely men home. The minimalist moon phases down his spine, a nod to lunar calendars, to women's cycles, to goddesses long forgotten. The tribal band, a statement, a tribute, a remembrance of ancient lines. Because tattooing is never just now, it's always before. It's the click of a thorn in Borneo, the breath of a grandmother in Morocco, the chill of ink in the Altai Mountains. It's pain endured with purpose, it's meaning worn like armor, it's the body made into story. And as you lie here, eyes closed, heartbeat steady, the ink of all these cultures flows gently through time, whispering across your skin like lullabies from long ago. You're not alone. You're part of something vast, something ancient, something beautifully permanent. So let the story settle. Let the lines fade softly into sleep. And when you wake, remember, some truths are written not in books, but in the skin.
Imagine waking up in a bed so stuffed with swan feathers it feels like sleeping on an overcooked cloud, only to realize the worst part of your morning hasn't even started yet. The servants are arguing over whether your bathwater should be merely lukewarm or blisteringly hot. The cook's demanding 13 imported spices for breakfast, and somewhere in the courtyard your hunting falcons are shrieking because last night's dinner leftovers offended their delicate palates. Welcome to the crushing reality of medieval wealth, where the gold is heavy, the expectations are heavier, and your social reputation could shatter faster than a goblet flung at a misperforming jester. You inherit your fortune the way some people inherit crooked noses, an unavoidable feature of your birth. And with it comes the castle. Perched on a hill, walls thick enough to shrug off battering rams. It looks impressive from a distance. Up close, the stones sweat moisture, the corridors echo like hollow drums, and every draft reminds you that wealth does not guarantee warmth. Your father's steward greets you at dawn carrying parchment lists so long they coil around his arm. The day's expenses, the week's fee schedule, the gift obligations you owe every neighboring baron's child whose christening threatens to cost more than your moat repairs. The first horror of being rich isn't the money you spend, but the money you must display. Your breakfast table must groan with abundance. White bread made from imported flour, pomegranates from Sicily, honey as clear as glass. You aren't especially hungry. Yesterday's feast still lingers like an anchor in your belly. But the servants are watching. The visiting monk is watching. Even your hounds, bred to detect weakness in a heartbeat, are watching. So you tear off chunks of fine bread and dip them into cinnamon-laced milk, pretending you'd rather eat this than the hearty peasant porridge you secretly admire. After breakfast comes wardrobe. You once thought silk was a luxury. Now you must decide which silk. Crimson for morning petitions? Peacock blue for hunting? The tailor arrives with bolts of cloth that cost more than 10 village cottages, and you're required to nod knowledgeably at weaves you can barely distinguish. It's not vanity, it's politics. Where faded velvet, and rumor will sprint across the county that your coffers are dwindling. Wear cloth of gold too often, and you'll be accused of arrogance. The sweet spot is elusive, shifting with every court visitor. A messenger arrives from the king's chamberlain, demanding your presence at court within the fortnight. Bring gifts worthy of your station, which means carving a fortune out of your fortune, presenting it with enough humility to avoid envy, but enough sparkle to avoid insult. Last time a lord undergifted, he spent a month in the palace stables shoveling dung purely for royal amusement. You vow not to repeat his mistake and instruct your steward to inventory your silver plates. You'll need at least 20, engraved, gilded, and blessed, just for the king's breakfast. By mid-morning, petitions begin. Tenants line the great hall clutching grievances. A miller whose will cracked, a widow whose cow wandered into your orchard, a shepherd who claims wolves are stealing his sheep and begs funds for traps. Each expects justice, generosity, or both. To deny them outright would brand you tyrannical. To grant every request would bankrupt even your vault. You weigh each plea, feeling coins slip through imaginary fingers. The worst part? No decision earns gratitude. Help the miller, and the widow mutters you favor man. Help the widow, and the shepherd calls you soft-hearted. Your wealth makes you savior and villain in the same breath. Lunch, excuse me. Dinner, because medieval people delight in confusing future generations, is served in the solar. Cold roast pheasant, pickled eel, almond milk pudding flecked with saffron. You taste them all, smile politely, and wish for simple cheese and brown bread. The kitchen staff watch for approval. If you leave too much uneaten, they'll fear dismissal. If you eat too heartily, they'll assume the morning meal was insufficient and up the extravagance. You nibble like a diplomat, signaling satisfaction yet restraint. Another performance in the endless theater of wealth. Afternoon brings inspections. First the granary, rats again, gnawing through grain bags despite last month's investment in stone lining. You order new cats, pedigreed mousers, of course, because common barn cats would raise eyebrows among visiting nobles. Then the vineyard. Late frost threatened the grapes. Your vintner begs permission to import barrels from Gascony to maintain cellar prestige. You sigh, nod, and picture silver plates evaporating into French oak. As the sun lowers, you change clothes for supper. Dark velvet trimmed with sable that still smells faintly of the trapper's smokehouse. The great hall shimmers with torchlight reflecting off polished armor displays. Each suit a silent reminder of another expense. Guests arrive. A countess with a laugh sharp enough to slice glass. Her elderly husband who dozes between courses, Two knights, rumor says, are scouting alliances. Seating them is choreography. Place the countess too far from the hearth, and she'll complain of drafts. Place her too close, and the knights will grumble about favoritism. You arrange them like chess pieces, hoping no one notices the anxiety behind your gracious smile. Supper unfurls a spectacle. First course, heron pie with flaky crust sculpted into miniature battlements. Second course, sugar-crusted quince shaped into swans. Third course, spiced hare swimming in wine sauce, so rich it could pay a stonemason for a year. The minstrels play, jesters tumble, but you scarcely taste a bite. Every forkful is measured against tomorrow's audit. When a knight praises the sauce, you beam while calculating the saffron cost. Afterward come the stories. Nobles trade tales of crusades, tournaments, scandal. Someone mentions the plague still smoldering in distant ports. Silence grips the table for a heartbeat. Wealth cannot shield you from disease, and every lord knows it. You sip watered wine, feeling the cold edge of mortality beneath your jeweled goblet. Then the moment passes. Laughter returns, forced but functional, like armor polished to hide rust. Night deepens. Servants clear tables, gather bones for the hounds. You retreat to your chamber, climbing spiral stairs that echo with each step. The room is vast, yet the tapestries can't block all drafts. Your bed awaits, draped in embroidered linens that scratch despite their finery. You dismiss attendants, too weary for formality, and sit by the hearth alone. The fire crackles, casting shadows on the walls, dancing silhouettes of all the coins you spent today. You think of the poorest peasant in your domain, asleep on straw beside a clay hearth. He may wake hungry, but he wakes free of these golden chains. No minstrels to pay, no silk to choose, no royal whims to placate. His worries are wheat and weather, tangible as soil beneath fingernails. Yours are whispers, rumors, invisible daggers aimed at your reputation. A parchment on your desk lists tomorrow's tasks. Send a jewel-studded reliquary to the abbey, fund repairs for the town bridge, commission a poet to commemorate your uncle's falconry accident, embellished to sound heroic. You close your eyes, feeling each obligation settle like stones on your chest. The castle sleeps, but you lie awake, counting costs. Servant wages, spice imports, falcon trainers, physician retainers, candle wax for 10,000 torches because darkness, for the rich, is unacceptable. Every flicker of light is a coin burning. Every silence filled with musicians is another purse emptied. Wealth, you realize, is the loudest hunger of all. It demands to be fed daily, hourly, or it will devour you from within. Tomorrow at dawn, trumpets will sound for a hunting party. You'll ride in brocade so heavy it hampers your seat, accompanied by hounds whose collars gleam with silver bells. The woods will echo with shouts, but the deer you chase won't be the true quarry. You hunt approval, prestige, the endless affirmation that your fortune is deserved. Miss the mark, and tongues will wag sharper than boar spears. The worst thing about being rich in medieval times? It isn't the weight of gold or the length of halls to heat. It's the unrelenting gaze of servants, neighbors, monarchs, even God, measuring every crumb you break, every robe you don, every coin you spend. You're a lantern in the dark, brilliant yet brittle, forever at risk of sputtering out if the oil of reputation runs dry. So you stoke the fire, pull Sable closer, and breathe a prayer that tomorrow your wealth still looks like blessing, not bait. Outside, the night wind moans through arrow slits, chanting the same refrain peasants whisper when they pass your gates. Better hungry than hunted by envy. You're inclined to agree, but dawn is hours away, and envy never sleeps. You settle beneath heavy covers, the weight of embroidered lions pressing on your chest, and finally drift toward slumber, anxious, exhausted, and unmistakably aware that in a world obsessed with appearances, the richest soul might be the one who can afford to close their eyes without counting. Morning in a medieval castle does not begin with peace. It begins with scraping, shutters being flung open, servants shuffling in with trays, water sloshing into basins, boots echoing in stone corridors. The wealthy do not wake naturally. They are awakened, summoned into another day of obligations wrapped in velvet and smothered in protocol. You sit up slowly, shoulders aching from a bed that looks impressive but feels like sleeping on packed hay layered with royal expectations. The room is colder than it should be. The fire went out sometime in the night, and the hearth is now a silent cavity of ash. A servant rushes to relight it. Another pours water into a bowl that will steam slightly, but never feel warm enough. Your first thought isn't about breakfast. It's about appearances. Who will visit today? What gossip will float in from court? What decisions will you be forced to make before the noon bell chimes? Because being rich doesn't mean having control. It means being watched by those who assume you do. Your valet presents your clothing for the day like a sacrament. Everything must be perfect. Your hose must match the trim of your outer tunic. Your cloak must convey both generosity and strength. You must look like a lord, not a merchant. It's a line as fine as the embroidery stitched by the nuns you patronize, and crossing it could invite mockery or suspicion. Once dressed, you walk into your private chapel. A priest is waiting. Daily prayer isn't optional for someone of your rank. It's expected, not because you're pious, but because your wealth must be sanctified. A rich man without God is just a tyrant in velvet. You mutter Latin verses while the priest eyes your new ring. You donated a reliquary last week. You'll need to fund something again soon to keep your soul and reputation intact. Back in the hall, a steward awaits with yet another scroll. Today's dilemmas are particularly grim. A bridge collapsed near the Western Mill, killing 2 men. One was a tenant. The other was a traveling merchant's son. The merchant is demanding compensation. The villagers demand you rebuild the bridge immediately. Neither demand is simple. If you pay too much, the merchant will see you as a target for future lawsuits. If you delay rebuilding, the peasants might think you careless. Either way, you spend coin to solve problems you didn't create and gain no gratitude in return. While you debate the cost of a new stone bridge, a noblewoman arrives unannounced. Her gown shimmers like dragonfly wings, clearly foreign silk, and she greets you with the smile of someone who expects your full attention. She is a widow of considerable means, but her presence signals something more dangerous: matchmaking. In medieval high society, wealth makes you a prize to be captured, maneuvered, or absorbed. The noblewoman's sons need lands. Her family wants your allegiance. Her visit is not social, it's strategic. She compliments the tapestries, praises your wine cellar, and offers to host a feast in your honor. What she doesn't say, but implies with every glance, is, "Join us, or we may join someone else." You entertain her politely, offering spiced wine and idle talk about falcon breeding. But every word is weighed. If you show too much interest, it's courtship. Too little, and it's insult. You nod, smile, promise to consider her invitation, then retreat the moment propriety allows. Behind you, she's already discussing your holdings with your steward. You escape to the stables. The grooms are feeding your destriers, each beast worth more than a merchant ship. Their hooves have been polished, their manes combed, and their stalls swept clean. You ride one out onto the hunting grounds, not for sport, but for breath. Out here, among the trees and the hounds, the expectations soften, or they should, but even the woods whisper duties. Your falconer complains that a rival lord has acquired a rare Hungarian breed. If you don't respond, preferably by importing something rarer, you risk falling behind in the unspoken competition of grandeur. You nod absently, calculating the cost of foreign birds and the politics of one-upping a neighbor who once offered you salt as a peace gesture. Back at the manor, the cook is in a state. Tonight's banquet must include something unexpected. The last feast featured a roasted boar with a gilded apple in its mouth. the one before that had sugar sculptures of your family crest. Now, the cook suggests a live swan released from a pie crust. It will not survive the ordeal, but the shock alone will guarantee a week's worth of compliments. You agree, sickened, but aware that in this world, performance is sustenance. Afternoon slips into early evening, and your physician arrives for his routine visit. Not because you're sick, but because people of your class don't wait to fall ill. You pay him handsomely to warn you of ailments before they exist. He asks about your sleep, your appetite, your bowels. You answer truthfully, worse, fading, irregular. He prescribes herbs from the east and leeches from the river. You nod, pretending to believe. You don't, but you'll take the potions anyway, because should anything happen to you, people will whisper, he didn't even keep a physician. Later, as the banquet begins, you prepare to host. Hosting is not enjoyment. It's duty wrapped in wine-soaked merriment. You must circulate, flatter, steer conversations, and most importantly, never show fatigue. Everyone eats at your expense, drinks from your cellars, laughs at your jester's stale jokes, and judges you with every bite. A minstrel begins to sing a ballad about a knight who squandered his inheritance chasing a lady who vanished into a forest. You hear the message clearly. The song was chosen. It's a warning or a tease. You smile politely, clench your goblet, and pretend it amuses you. Dinner stretches for hours. Roasted sturgeon, quail and clover, fritters soaked in rose water. You eat mechanically, ignoring the pinch of your girdle. Across the hall, a young squire spills wine on a noblewoman's gown. She gasps. The squire pales. You must act. Too stern, and you'll be cruel. Too lenient, and you'll seem weak. You offer her a gift of new fabric from your personal stores and dismiss the squire from serving duties for a week. Everyone nods. You've done well, but you feel like a chess piece moved by invisible hands. When the musicians pack up and the guests leave in clusters, murmuring about the evening's fashion and gossip, you retreat again. Your steward trails behind, scroll in hand. Tomorrow's expenditures include wax for the chapel, alms for the poor, replacements for the spilled wine, and a commission for a tapestry commemorating your great-grandfather's battle at sea. You return to your chamber. The fire is low. Your shoulders ache. You remove your cloak yourself tonight, dismissing the servants early. The room is silent. For the first time all day, you are alone. And yet, even in solitude, you are not free. The weight of image, duty, appearance, it presses down harder in the quiet. You think about the village again, where children sleep beside hearths and dream of more food, not more finery. Their worries are simple. They do not pay for minstrels or argue about swan pies. They do not fear court rumors. They are not targets of political marriages. They are not envied. You are. Wealth, in medieval times, was not liberation. It was a theater, a burden, a fortress, and a prison. Each coin you owned cast a shadow. Each gem you wore had eyes. And tomorrow, it begins again. You blow out the candle, roll to your side, and wish, for just a moment, you could wake up in a cottage, barefoot and unknown. But your name is carved into ledgers, and your life, gilded though it is, no longer belongs to you. It belongs to your reputation, to tradition, to the expectations of 1,000 eyes. And no amount of gold can buy your way out. The next morning begins not with birdsong, but with knocking. Heavy, deliberate, insistent. Your steward enters without waiting for a reply. He's carrying messages, wax-sealed and ominously read. One from a local bishop, one from a royal courier, and one, thinner and dirt-streaked, from the bailiff in your northern estate. You rub your temples. There's no time for food or quiet thought. Just layers of obligations arriving faster than the servants can light the candles. The bishop's letter is a summons. He's hosting a modest gathering of nobles next week, and your presence is expected. Not requested, expected. Because your wealth makes you more than a guest. It makes you part of the fabric that upholds his prestige. Refusing would insult the church. Accepting means traveling for 3 days, bringing gifts, and pretending to enjoy holy company that spends most of its time calculating how much land you're willing to donate in your will. The royal message is worse. It demands a contribution to the king's latest campaign. No amount is specified, but the language drips with unspoken menace. You know what this means, a tax disguised as patriotism. You must fund soldiers and horses, weapons and wagons. And you must do so quickly, lest the crown look elsewhere, and wonder why your coffers are so full during a time of national need. The bailiff's note is the most honest of the three. There's been an outbreak of some kind. Cattle dying, children feverish. The village healer says it's the rot. You'll need to send aid, grain, medicine, silver, and maybe men to bury the dead. If you don't, your name will sour faster than the milk in those cottages. You look around your room. The silver mirror, the carved bedposts, the jeweled box that holds rings you barely wear. And none of it feels like wealth. It feels like weight. Every coin you own is already claimed. Every luxury in your house has a string attached. You rise, dress, and begin to decide who you must disappoint the least. In the great hall, your seneschal has arranged today's visitors. The first is a monk from a neighboring abbey. He's thin, stern, and smells faintly of beeswax. He claims they've recently discovered a rare relic, a finger bone of St. Crispin, and they are seeking noble patrons to help construct a reliquary chapel worthy of such a holy find. He hints that another lord has already pledged support, which means, of course, that this is a competition. Support the monks, and your name will be carved in stone above the chapel door. Decline, and your rival's name will be. You nod, promise to reflect prayerfully, and move on. Next is a local blacksmith's widow. Her husband was trampled during a recent joust. Your joust, your knights, your guests. She asks, politely, for help. Her son is still young. She has no anvil, no materials, no means. If you don't intervene, the village loses a trade. But if you give too freely, others will follow. Your steward is already frowning. You agree to fund the boy's apprenticeship in a nearby town. A compromise. Enough to show generosity, not enough to invite floodgates. And just as she bows and departs, a courier from the guilds arrives. Ah, the guilds. Once, they were mere associations, bakers, tanners, weavers, trying to protect their trades. Now, they're miniature kingdoms with laws, dues, and politics of their own. This one represents the dyers. They claim your wool merchants have been importing cheaper dyes from the Low Countries, undermining local artisans. They request, no, they insist, that you impose standards, or they'll stop supplying you with their services. You nod, feign concern, and mentally calculate how many merchants will be angered if you cave to the guilds. Another choice between fires. Afternoon arrives, and your physician returns, this time with a foreign scholar in tow. He's a Moorish doctor from Granada, speaking Latin with a velvet accent and offering tinctures that smell like citrus and myrrh. He praises your patronage, compliments your architecture, and then subtly inquires whether you might sponsor a translation of an ancient medical text, one he insists could revolutionize surgery. It will cost as much as a small manor house. You smile, flatter him, and say you'll review it with your chaplain, even though you know the answer is no. Not because the book isn't valuable, but because it is foreign and the court is watching. Being rich in medieval times doesn't just mean being seen. It means being scrutinized. Every alliance, every guest, every idea you support is interpreted as a political signal. Support too many foreign thinkers? You're called unchristian. Donate to the wrong abbey? You offend the bishop. Treat your tenants too kindly? You look weak. Too harsh. You become the villain in next month's troubadour song. It's a tightrope with poisoned tips at both ends. At dusk, you retire to your solar for what you pretend is rest. In reality, it's meetings. The architect you hired is presenting options for a new banquet hall wing. Not because you want it, but because Lord Ethelric just added one. His guests now dine under vaulted ceilings with painted saints. Yours dine beneath aging beams and fading banners. Optics matter. You nod as he unveils the parchment drawings. Vaulted ceilings. Stained glass imported from France. A tiled floor shaped like a chessboard. You say yes. You don't know how you'll afford it, but you say yes anyway. Because in this world, falling behind is worse than falling ill. Next comes your falconer. He's excited. One of your birds laid eggs. Rare ones. He suggests gifting one to the prince's brother as a gesture of goodwill. It will travel in a velvet cage, he says, and bear your sigil. You nod again. More coins. More expectation. Another string attached. Evening bells toll, and dinner is served. Not a feast, just a meal. Still, it requires roasted pheasant, cheese from your Alpine estate, and a delicate plum wine that took 3 years to age. You barely taste it. You eat surrounded by tapestries that depict battles your grandfather never fought, and you wonder, quietly, what they'll weave for you. A banquet scene? A council meeting? A library full of tomes you never had time to read. One of your pages spills a jug. You don't react. You're too tired. Later, you walk alone in the gallery. The stone floor is cold beneath your slippers. The windows show nothing but fog. Somewhere an owl hoots. And you think, again, about freedom. You remember being a boy, before your father died, before you inherited these lands, these duties, this house full of expectations. You remember running barefoot by the stream, catching frogs, being scolded for muddy clothes. You remember asking a servant if he envied your family's wealth. He said no. He said, "You'll never get to leave." And now you understand. Because that's the worst thing. Not the fear of poisoning, or the politics, or the rumors. It's that you can't leave. You can't sell it all and walk away. You can't become a monk or a mercenary or even a beggar without scandal, disgrace, ruin. You are the Lord, the wealthy, the pillar, the one others lean on. And no one ever asks what you lean on. You return to your chamber. The candles burn low. You sit on the edge of your bed, staring at your boots. They cost a fortune, dyed leather, silver stitching. But they've never walked a free step. And you wonder, if you took them off, walked into the night, and kept walking, how far you'd get before someone stopped you. Because being rich in medieval times meant you were owned. Not by chains, but by legacy. And no velvet robe can soften that truth. The final day of the week begins in silence. Not because the burdens have lifted, but because today, they wear a different mask. Today is Judgment Day, not the divine one. That's saved for churches and doomsday murals. This is the man-made kind. The day your tenants come to report, your officials bring their tallies, and your advisors whisper what others say about you when your back is turned. First comes the reeve. His robe is worn, his shoes muddy, his face tight with the worry of someone who delivers bad news for a living. He lays the scroll before you. The harvest from the southern fields is down. Rains came too early. The beehives in the west failed. The cider press broke. 2 sheep are missing. 1 miller is suspected of undermeasuring grain. You nod, not because you're calm, but because that's your only option. Every number on that scroll is a thread in the great tapestry of your wealth. Fray one, and others pull loose. Next comes the tax collector, not for you to pay, but for you to enforce. You are expected to extract tithes and dues from your tenants, even if they have nothing left to give. Even if their roofs leak, their children cough blood, and their fields lie fallow. Mercy is not in the records the king's men review, only numbers. And so, you must be both lord and loan shark. You ask about the most desperate. A widow with 4 children owes 3 chickens. She has none. A cobbler's apprentice missed his coin payment. He claims he was robbed on the road. You sigh. You authorize deferment, short-term mercy, but each kindness costs you. The crown won't accept excuses from you the way you accept them from others. A servant arrives with a fresh cloak. Today is the day you must appear in the great hall, not to feast, but to listen, to pretend that the petitions from your people are meaningful, even though the decisions are already made. They file in slowly. A tenant farmer who wants permission to marry his daughter to a boy from another village. You must consider the implications. Will her dowry leave your domain? Will her labor be lost? Will another lord gain influence through this marriage? A brewer begs for exclusive rights to use the stream behind your orchard. If you grant it, the dyers will protest. If you refuse, he threatens to sell ale to a rival estate. Even something as small as marriage or beer becomes politics. Because when you are rich, nothing is small. Every choice echoes. After the hall clears, your chaplain requests a moment of your time. He reminds you, gently, that your soul requires charity, that almsgiving is expected, that you haven't commissioned any stained glass windows this season, that a nearby monastery is in need of stone, that your tomb has yet to be designed. You nod. Yes, of course, you'll see to it. But inside, your stomach churns. Because even heaven has an entry fee when you're wealthy. Piety isn't about prayer. It's about architecture, endowments, and legacy. You try to eat, but food has become flavorless. You've had every dish, every spice, every bird that ever flew through a recipe. Your teeth ache from candied fruit. Your liver groans from imported wine. Your tongue is bored. Excess has dulled you. Later, you retreat to the library. A scholar waits there, eager to show you a new manuscript, freshly copied from a Roman source. You skim the vellum pages. They speak of governance, of glory, of golden ages where emperors ruled with wisdom and might. You close the book gently. You don't want wisdom. You want silence. But there's none of that in this life. Your steward returns before sunset. He has news. Your cousin, distant, ambitious, tactful, has been cited at court. He's charming the queen with stories of your generosity. He's buying gifts for lesser nobles. He's feeding rumors that your estate is failing, that your holdings are mismanaged. He wants your seat, your power, your title. You cannot confront him directly. That would seem desperate. Instead, you must write letters to allies, bishops, distant cousins, gently countering the gossip, reasserting your stability, hinting at new projects and generous feasts. Your scribe begins drafting at once. By candlelight, you sign your name again and again, and with each curve of ink, your soul empties a little more. You don't sleep that night. Not truly. You lie in your vast, carved bed, beneath embroidered sheets, listening to the wind whisper through arrow slits. You hear laughter in the hall below. Servants, free to laugh, free to rest. You envy them, because the truth is this: being rich in medieval times was a gilded trap. Yes, you had land, titles, coin, but you had no peace, no privacy, no reprieve. You were always on stage, always playing a part, and the play never ended. You couldn't weep without causing rumors. You couldn't vanish without offending allies. You couldn't even change without someone asking why. Your life was a ledger and not one you controlled. The next morning, a falcon cries in the courtyard. A new day begins. The same roles, the same rituals. You rise, you dress, you wear your wealth like armor. And once more, you walk into the light, knowing they will judge how brightly you shine, but never how much it costs to keep burning. Because no one pities the rich, not even when they suffer in silence, not even when the gold feels like chains, not even when all they want is to be unseen. And so, you remain resplendent, responsible, and remarkably alone. Because that's the price. Not silver, not rubies, not horses, but freedom. And you paid it long ago. You're standing at the edge of the known world, staring down a road that isn't really a road at all, just a faint scar in the dust disappearing into shimmering heat, and suddenly it hits you. Every step forward is a gamble you're statistically doomed to lose. You tighten the leather straps on boots that weren't built for this, adjust a wool cloak that will soon smell like every animal along the route, and join the slow-moving caravan already creaking westward. You've convinced yourself you're ready for silk, spices, and stories, but the Silk Road doesn't trade in romance, it trades in endurance. Ahead lies 7,000 desolate kilometers stitched together by dunes, steppes, and mountain passes where even sunshine feels weaponized. The first thing you learn is that no one walks the Silk Road alone, not if they want to reach the next sunrise. Caravans are your only lifeline, a lumbering parade of camels, donkeys, and hollow-eyed traders who've perfected the art of looking out for themselves while pretending to look out for you. You fall in line behind a camel that smells like a tannery left in the sun, and already your water skin feels too light. Day 1. The desert air is dry enough to crisp parchment. Your lips crack before noon, your tongue thickens, and the wind stings with blown salt that slices like invisible glass. You wrap a cloth across your face, but grains still find their way into every fold. By sunset, you've sweated out half your optimism and all your modesty, gladly drinking from a goatskin that tastes faintly of old cheese because thirst is a tyrant with no palate. Night 1. Cold clamps down like iron. The desert swings from furnace to freezer in hours, and you're wearing the same thin tunic that was too hot at midday. Camels fold their legs and sigh, traders huddle around a fire made from dung, and someone passes a copper cup of fermented mare's milk. You gag, swallow, and discover that warmth and disgust can coexist. Overhead, the sky is a bowl of stars so bright it hurts. You think it's beautiful until you remember each star means another mile you haven't walked. By the third dawn, you meet your second enemy, boredom. The horizon never changes. Sand, scrub, blue sky, repeat. You stop asking, "Are we there yet?" because no one is ever there. They're only ever halfway to somewhere worse. Conversation dries up. Languages overlap. Sogdian curses, Persian bargaining, Turkic lullabies, none of which you really understand. Laughter is rationed like water. Every word costs moisture. Somewhere between oases, you learn about distance the hard way. A pack camel collapses from exhaustion. Its driver shrugs, cuts the ropes, and divides the cargo. Dead weight is buried in sand because digging a grave means softer soil than the desert offers. The caravan can't wait. Schedules don't exist, but timing is everything. If you miss the next well, you miss oxygen. So you keep walking, stepping around the shallow hump in the sand that used to bellow at sunrise. Then come the bandits. They don't announce themselves with banners. They appear as mirage-shaped riders on the horizon, silhouettes that blur in the heat, then sharpen into galloping hooves and flashing blades. Your caravan chief orders everyone into a defensive circle, camels kneeling, traders clutching whatever passes for a weapon, a dagger, a staff, a stick of moral support. You clutch nothing, realizing that courage was not included in your travel kit. The bandits circle, gauging odds. Maybe they decide today's haul isn't worth the arrows, or maybe your caravan's guards look too well armed. Either way, they melt back into the dunes, a promise rather than a threat removed. Tonight, no one sleeps. Every shadow is a sword. You learn that safety is a rumor passed from traveler to traveler, never verified, always believed because the alternative is panic. Weeks blur. Sand turns to gravel, gravel to grass, grass to cracked mud flats where wind whips dust into walls tall enough to hide sunrise. At an oasis, less paradise, more puddle, you trade beads for stale flatbread and hear tales of cities ahead. Samarkand's blue domes, Kashgar's labyrinthine alleys, Duan Huang's cave temples. Each name sounds like salvation, but each is also a reminder you're not out of danger, only nearing new kinds. Urban bandits charge taxes at the gate. Officials invent tolls. Diseases bloom in crowded caravanserais where fleas change hosts faster than gossip. Crossing the Pamir Mountains is next, a climb so steep camels groan like broken wheels. Altitude thins the air, stealing breath mid-sentence. You tie felt around your shoes to keep toes from freezing, but your thoughts grow sluggish. Nights here are darker than memory. The moon hides behind glacial peaks, and the Milky Way feels uncomfortably close, like you could trip into it and never stop falling. A trader from Balk collapses with mountain sickness. The caravan chief sighs and orders redistribution of his bales. No one wastes time on grief. The mountain will claim its due regardless. You whisper a prayer, unsure which god has jurisdiction in air this thin, and force your feet forward. Every step feels like dragging a millstone through snow. Days later, you descend into high grassland, Tian Shan foothills where nomads graze horses that look carved from iron. They charge a fee for crossing, payable in salt or silk. You have neither, so you hand over the tin mirror you've carried since home. In return, you get a bowl of hot broth that tastes like heaven and hides bits of something you hope once had legs. You drink anyway. Etiquette is survival. Ahead lies the Taklamakan Desert, whose name locals claim means you go in, but you won't come out. It's a joke, but not really. Sandstorms here carve ribs into dune faces and bury entire towns like careless secrets. Water sources shift, oases vanish, maps lie. Your guide insists on traveling by night, using stars for directions because landmarks move. Camels sink to their knees in powdery sand that swallows hoofs. You cough so much your ribs ache. Moonlight turns dunes silver, beautiful, yes, but beauty here is just danger dressed for a festival. Halfway through Taklamakan, you run out of dates and start chewing dried mare sinew. It has the consistency of regret and the flavor of leather left in smoke. You eat because hunger rewrites the rules of repulsion. Your water skin is a science experiment of questionable odors. You drink because thirst doesn't offer alternatives. Mirages tempt you. A brilliant lake shimmers ahead. Someone shouts and breaks into a run before stumbling into hot sand, cursing. You learn to distrust anything pretty unless it can slap you. Reality on the Silk Road rarely looks inviting. When you finally stagger into Oasis Town Naya, your reflection in a bronze plate scares you. Skin blistered, lips blood-cracked, eyes rimmed with dust so fine it feels tattooed. But you're alive, which is more than can be said for 3 travelers who lie wrapped in reed mats near the well. Their journey ended by dehydration, infection, or simple exhaustion. No one's sure. The local governor charges burial fees for outsiders. Even death pays tolls here. You rest. Rest is relative. A damp corner in a mud brick room. Fleas as bedding. A cup of tea boiled to murky bravery. You trade your last copper coins for a handful of apricots that taste like stolen sunrise. For a moment, the world seems almost kind. Then you remember the next leg of the route, the Gansu Corridor, a narrow strip sandwiched between desert and mountain where armies march and taxes multiply. Travelers whisper warnings. Watch for imperial inspectors who tally everything: number of camels, loads of silk, breaths you take if they could. Under-report and you're fined. Over-report and they confiscate excess for the emperor. Your caravan chief advises silence. Speak only when asked, and even then, calculate each syllable like it costs coin, because on the Silk Road, it does. Plague rumors surface. Someone from a westbound caravan coughed blood 2 camps ago. You tie a cloth soaked in vinegar around your face, pretending it helps. Fear spreads faster than disease. People sleep in separate circles, cook with separate spoons, and trade only with gloved hands. But the fleas don't respect boundaries. One bite, and fever either burns through or burns out. You wake each morning counting symptoms like beads. No boils yet. Thank every deity. And finally, weeks, maybe months later, time has lost its edges. You see the city walls of Chang'an on the horizon. They rise like a promise of finish lines, but crossing them means new rules. Customs duties, residency permits, language barriers where a wrong tone can turn a greeting into an insult. The caravan dissolves at the gates, each trader splintering into alleys like marbles spilled from a bag. You step onto the broad avenue, heart hammering, pockets almost empty, body thinner, mind older. Congratulations, you survived the Silk Road. Except survive is generous. You've lost months, coin, innocence, and perhaps a fragment of sanity. Ahead, the return journey waits, because people rarely cross once. Profit demands round trips. And each passage increases the odds you won't make another. But tonight, you're too tired to think about the road back. You rent a mat in a crowded inn, swallow braised noodles spiced with something that scorches delightfully, and let exhaustion drown anxiety. Outside, Chang'an's lanterns glow like captured constellations. The city hums with languages, bargains, and hopes you're too weary to chase. As you drift to sleep, the Silk Road stretches behind you, an uncoiling dragon of dust, danger, and whispered fortunes. You wonder if anyone truly survives it. or if every traveler leaves some essential piece of themselves buried in a dune, caught in a mountain gale, or floating, nameless, in a desert mirage. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow's stirrings will summon new caravans, new risks, new miles. Survival here isn't a finish line. It's a wager renewed at every dawn, paid in sweat, vigilance, and the willingness to trade comfort for the chance to move one step farther than fear. And somewhere, outside the inn's thin walls, a camel bell jingles, a soft, metallic reminder that the road never rests, and neither can you for long. You awaken to the clamor of temple bells and market criers, an orchestra of urgency that shreds whatever fragile rest last night granted. Chang'an at dawn is a tidal surge of humanity, scholars haggling over scrolls, porters hoisting sacks of Sichuan pepper, singers advertising tea houses with voices sharp enough to slice persimmons. You sit up on a reed mat that smells of spilled soy and dust, muscles aching like rusted hinges, and realize your first critical task is to leave the city before it eats what little resolve you have left. Because Chang'an is beautiful only until you count the ways it can trap you. Customs fines, lodging fees, brokers who pledge cheap camels but deliver diseased donkeys, all designed to siphon copper cash from newcomers 2 days to argue. You're almost broke already. One more day here and the return leg of your Silk Road gamble becomes an involuntary residency. So you barter away the last of your saffron, stingy pinches weighed on a brass scale haunted by sleight of hand, and purchase access to a departing caravan headed west. The broker, a silk-robed official with lotus root teeth, offers a scroll of paperwork that might pass for documentation or might be decorative. Either way, it costs an extra fee. You pay, grateful and resentful in the same breath. Outside the western gate the caravan waits. 30 camels, 24 donkeys, for ox carts groaning beneath bales of raw silk, and a ragtag choir of travelers. You recognize none of their language as instantly snatches of Sogdian here, Tibetan there, a trader from Khotan mumbling prayers in Sanskrit. The road is a mouth that swallows difference and chews it into uneasy alliance. Your new guide is a woman named Tursanai, sharp-eyed, scar over one brow, voice as flat as the deserts you'll re-enter soon. She collects every traveler's name, origin, and skill set the way a general counts spears. When she reaches you, you confess you're handy with a knife but hopeless with horses. She grunts, then stay near the middle of the column. Less chance you get trampled or robbed first. Reassurance, Silk Road style. By midday, the caravan lurches into motion, leaving Chang'an's lacquered gates behind. Paved roads dissolve into compacted earth, then into ribbon-thin paths threading wheat fields nodding under autumn breeze. Farmers pause, shading eyes, and nod without smiling. Travelers mean taxes. Taxes mean heavier burdens come harvest. Children wave. You wave back, hoping goodwill is still legal tender somewhere on this journey. Your pack is lighter now, 2 extra flasks of water, a half-wheel of goat cheese salted to near stone, a small pouch of copper coins stamped with the Han Emperor's visage. Money loses weight, but not importance. Out here, it measures not opulence, but survival minutes. You tuck it close to skin. The path soon climbs into the lush hills, soft soil carved into ragged gullies by centuries of wind. Tiny landslides stutter under camel feet. Dust ghosts rise, white as bone powder, and cling to beards, eyebrows, eyelashes. Breathing feels like inhaling pottery shards. Someone coughs up muddy phlegm. Tursanai orders cloth masks soaked in vinegar. The stench clears sinuses while further eroding optimism. 2 days west, and the hills spit you onto the Gansu corridor, the fabled throat of the empire, 70 leagues of narrow flatland hemmed by mountains that look carved by angry giants. Good trade route, terrible escape route. There's nowhere to detour if disaster bars the way. The wind here never truly sleeps, it merely changes pitch. It whistles through harness rings, rattles cart planks, and writes sand braille on exposed skin. At the first fortified relay station, Yamengwin, the Jade Gate, imperial clerks demand proof of taxable goods. You present the broker's scroll. They squint, unroll, confer, sniff, frown, shrug, then charge an ink inspection fee anyway. You pay. Lesson renewed. Bureaucracy is a desert with paperwork dunes, and every clerk keeps a shovel. Inside the walls, a bustling market sprouts like mushrooms around dung-fed soil. Soldiers trade black market arrows for candied plums. Monks hunt for blank scrolls. Itinerant doctors hawk bearball pills guaranteed to cure melancholy. You buy a small jar of sesame oil for cracked lips and another of alum powder for purifying questionable water. A tiny insurance policy against thirst and infection, purchased with the last of your Chang'an coins. Beyond the Jade Gate lies the Hushi Corridor's emptier half. You march beneath watchtowers spaced like punctuation across a scroll of dust. Each tower signals imperial oversight. Each also signals safe wells. But safe is relative. One well's water tastes faintly of copper and goat decay. You fill skins anyway. Dehydration kills quicker than disgust. One dawn a sandstorm ambushes without warning. It arrives as a distant roar, like armies clashing behind a curtain. Then the sky turns ochre. Wind slaps tints flat. Daylight folds into red twilight. Tersanai screams for everyone to kneel between camel humps. You wrap heckloth around eyes, mouth, nostrils until breathing feels like drowning in linen. Sand needles sting exposed ankles. Minutes stretch elastic, then snap. When silence falls, the world resembles a half-finished sculpture. Dunes reshaped, footprints erased, 2 camels missing. The caravan votes to press on, minus the lost animals. Their loads redistribute among already burdened beasts. Protesting groans fill the air like low thunder. No one mentions turning back. An unspoken rule: retreat is pricier than risk. At dusk you reach Dunhuang, oasis of legend. Crescent-shaped lake, cliffside grottos painted with Buddhas calm enough to shame thunder, and officials only moderately corrupt. You pay for a spot in a communal inn. Adobe walls, reed mats cleaner than your last ones, and a cook who boils millet into porridge thicker than camel paste yet miraculously comforting. In the bazaar, lanterns paint gold halos over spice mounts. You wander half hoping to buy something, anything, to replenish your dwindling kit, but your purse is almost empty. Then you notice merchants clustered around a storyteller spinning yarns about demons in the Taklamakan. He claims they mimic loved ones' voices, luring travelers off route. The crowd laughs nervously. You don't laugh at all. Because tomorrow, you enter that desert again, this time from the eastern edge, and you know demons need no supernatural origin. They are thirst, disorientation, greedy companions, your own gnawing doubts, all perfectly capable of wearing familiar voices. Morning departure feels like marching into a kiln. The Taklamakan's edge greets you with waves of heat that wobble vision. Camels sink ankles in sugar-fine sand. Each footlift pours grains that trickle like hourglass seconds. Tersanai sets a brutal schedule. Walk at dusk, camp when moon rises, rest midday beneath makeshift shade screens. The rhythm bruises circadian instincts, but obeying the desert's mood outranks comfort. 3 nights in, you stub a toe on something pale sticking from sand. You brace for bone, human, camel, choice dealer's pick. It's wood, a broken post, remnants of a once tall marker splintered by wind. A Sogdian inscription clings to it. Turn back. Water lies. The final word is buried beneath dunes. No one digs. Advice half-read is still warning enough. Water discipline tightens. A swallow every hour, no more. Lips split anyway. At the 3rd well, a brackish pit barely wet, fistfights erupt over bucket turns. Tersanai ends the dispute by smashing a man's nose with the butt of her bow. Blood sprays, evaporates almost instantly, leaving salt streaks. He lives, lesson branded deeper than bone. The desert is referee, rules non-negotiable. Eventually dunes relent, scraping horizon smooth as whetstone, and distant poplar trees appear, green exclamation points promising the oasis of Kucha. But between promise and arrival lies rock-strewn barrens where heat radiates up and down, turning midday into a forge. One donkey collapses. Its owner weeps, first tears you've seen in weeks, and debates staying behind. Tersanai forbids it. If you stop, you feed wolves before sunset. The owner ties a small charm to the donkey's halter, whispers goodbye, and walks on. Kucha greets you with mud walls patched like mismatched quilts. Inside, white-clad priests of a faith you don't recognize chant in a temple scented with sandalwood and sheep tallow. You barter your last jar of sesame oil for a bowl of lamb stew swimming in chili, so fierce it makes pain interesting again. Sustenance burns. You welcome the distraction. Here you must resupply somehow for the stretch across the Tian Shan foothills. Credit networks exist, scribbled IOUs countersigned by community elders. You pledge to repay in Samarkand. The grain merchandise you, weighing your sweat-caked cloak and cracked boots, then nods. Trust among the desperate, a fragile currency, but often the only one left. Mountains loom next, jagged teeth chewing at sky. The caravan climbs switchbacks where hooves spark on stone. Air thins, conversation thins with it. You share silence with strangers who, weeks ago, were exotic curiosities and now feel like mirror images of your own endurance. Near a pass called Heaven's Gate, a snow squall barrels from nowhere. Frost forms on camel eyelashes within breaths. You wrap will cloak tighter, but cold sneaks through stitches. Every heartbeat feels like hammer on brittle glass. Shelter is a goat herder's cave, smoky with dung fire, walls scribbled with crude paintings of hunters and ibex. Numb hands clutch tea brewed from pine needles. It tastes like resin and resurrection. A Kyrgyz herder strums a two-string lute, voice lilting through minor keys that echo off stone and settle behind ribcage. Music reminds you you're alive, which is both comfort and burden. When passes descend into the Fergana Valley, grass spreads plush as carpets, rivers braid silver between poppy fields, and fruit trees bow under apricots so ripe they burst. The caravan splinters, some veer north to Tashkent, others south to Bactria. You, chasing a tenuous promise of debt settlement, head towards Samarkand's turquoise dream. A fresh escort of Sogdian guards joins. They demand toll payment up front. You have nothing left but a half-wheel of goat cheese and a story. They take the cheese and allow the story. You weave it hurriedly, a tale of surviving Taklamakan demons, of sand swallowing camels whole, of a guide who cracked bandit skulls under crimson moonlight. By the end, the guards are laughing at the exaggerations or at your audacity. You're unsure, but they wave you through. Samarkand's walls rise at dawn, sun-igniting blue mosaic tiles so bright you blink tears. But before gates open, imperial tax agents, different empire now, different uniforms, same predatory smiles, line travelers assessing import duties by weight, smell, and whimsy. Your pack is nearly empty. They still charge a road maintenance fee. You sigh, pay an IOU ink, and step into a city humming with bizarre chaos. Pomegranate juice vendors, Zoroastrian fire temples, Greek stonemasons praising wine stronger than prudence. You find your creditor in a caravanserai scented with cardamom and camel sweat. Hand over the IOU. He weighs it like measuring morality, then nods, debt closed. You're coin poor but obligation light for the first time since Chang'an. You should rest. Instead, you wander Registan Square, staring at domes glazed like fallen fragments of sky. And you realize survival on the Silk Road isn't about endurance alone. It's about metamorphosis. Each oasis sloughs old illusions. Each desert brands new truths. You've become part merchant, part diplomat, part ghost of the person who first stepped onto that dusty ribbon months ago. You traded comfort for stories etched in scar tissue and callus. Nightcloak Samarkand and perfume of charcoal and rosewater. You lie on a rooftop under constellations that once spelled dread and now spell direction. Somewhere beyond those stars is home, or what remains of it. But the road west continues through Persian highlands, Syrian deserts, Anatolian plateaus. Survival odds shrink with every league, yet your pulse hums not with fear, but with the strange gravity of unfinished journey. You close weary eyes, knowing dawn will toss new dice. On the Silk Road, survival is never past tense. It is a verb you conjugate daily, with dust for ink and miles for parchment. And tomorrow, you'll write it again, one blistered step, one bargain, one held breath at a time, until either the road or your will runs out. By the time you leave Samarkand, the silks you once carried are gone. Some sold, some stolen, some traded for warmth or water or survival. What's left is not cargo, but knowledge, a heavier kind of burden. You know now how quickly bread molds in camel heat. You've watched men go mad from heat stroke, then smile as if they remembered their childhood home. You've felt your own name grow strange in your mouth, like something you no longer fully own. The next leg begins under an indifferent sun. The caravan splinters and reforms again. This time, you join with a Persian trader named Darius who speaks 5 languages but prefers silence. His beard is neatly combed, his hands always stained with ink. He writes things down, everything, exchange rates, arguments, phases of the moon. He doesn't smile when you ask what he's recording. So I know what I survived, he says simply. From Samarkand you move west, toward Bokhara and Merv, the great pulse points of the Central Asian trade web. The land becomes flatter, the air dry like burnt parchment. Every step west feels like a crossing, not just of distance, but of memory. The further you go, the more the stories change. East of the desert, people spoke of demons and dragons. Here, the tales shift. Poison wells, ghost caravans, cities swallowed whole by sand. Outside Bokhara, a dust storm cloaks the horizon in orange haze. You shelter in a herder's yurt, exchanging dried apricots for a place near the fire. His family eats boiled roots in silence. The only decoration is a strip of cloth sewn with ancient symbols, protection charms against spirits, he explains. When the wind rattles the felt walls like an angry god, no one speaks. You realize then how common silence is out here, how words are rationed more carefully than food. When you reach Bokhara, the city nearly blinds you. Copper domes shimmer in the heat. Courtyards bloom with fountains and roses. But beneath the beauty, everything has a price. You pay a coin to enter the bathhouse, another for soap, 2 more for someone to guard your shoes. You scrub weeks of grit from your skin, but the ache in your bones remains. It's a deeper kind of weariness, something the Silk Road imprints in every traveler. In the caravanserai, a woman sings in a language you can't place. She sits on a rug dyed in deep reds, her fingers plucking a stringed instrument older than memory. Her voice is smoke and honey. You don't understand the words, but the song clings to your ribs like morning. You leave a copper coin near her bowl. She nods, not in thanks, but recognition. As you leave Bokhara, the terrain shifts again. Salt flats stretch like shattered mirrors. The glare is so bright it burns your eyes through fabric. Nights bring a bitter cold that seems to sharpen the edges of your thoughts. You walk slower now, not because of exhaustion, though that never leaves, but because every footstep feels like negotiation. The road offers nothing for free. Between Merv and Deshaper, the caravan is attacked. Not by bandits, but by fever. It starts with 1 man coughing blood, then 2. Soon it's 5. Tursunai is gone now, split east for Kashgar, but another guide, a tall Turk with sun-leathered skin, tries to keep order. Don't drink from the north well, he warns. It smells sweet. That's death water. You boil everything. Even then, some travelers fall. You see 1 woman collapse mid-step, her child still tied to her back. Another man, delirious, walks into the dark and never returns. You don't remember his name. No one does. That's how the road works. It swallows names first, then bodies. The survivors reach Neshaper looking like ghosts. Cloaks torn, eyes hollow, gait uneven. The city is kind in its way. You find refuge in a Sufi lodge, where the holy men feed you lentils and goat milk, no questions asked. 1 chants quietly at your bedside while you sweat out the last of the fever. When you wake, your legs tremble and your memory feels torn, like parchment left in the rain. The elder of the lodge presses a coin into your hand. You're not done walking, he says. But don't forget to stop sometimes. The road doesn't care if you live. You have to do that part yourself. You thank him, not sure if he means it literally or not. Onward, then. The road narrows into winding paths through the Elburz Mountains. You travel with fewer now, only 6 traders, 1 scribe, and a mute boy who tends the animals with gentle precision. You name him Ash, because of the way he moves through the soot of the campfire without sound. He never asked for food, but you share anyway. Kindness on the road is a rebellion, a dangerous one. In the mountains, you're caught in a rockfall. Boulders the size of bathhouses crash down with no warning. 1 man dies instantly. Another loses his leg, crushed beneath stone. You use your knife to help saw it off, while he bites down on a leather strap and sobs. He lives, but no longer walks. You fashion a sled from spare wood. No one says out loud what everyone knows. He's now a burden, and the next danger may mean leaving him behind. You don't. Not yet. The mountain passes spit you out onto the Iranian plateau, dry and open like the back of a sleeping beast. Villages appear every few days, each surrounded by walls, each wary of strangers. The further west you go, the more you are feared. You are a carrier of illness, of lies, of imperial agendas. You learn to bow slightly when you speak. You keep your hands visible. You sleep near your shoes, dagger tucked close. Then, the city of Re, older than empires, older than myth. Here, fire temples burn eternal flames. Zoroastrian priests walk barefoot over ash, chanting hymns in a tongue that stirs something old in you. A merchant invites you to dine. He serves rice with saffron, lamb with cinnamon, and pomegranate wine. The sweetness stuns your mouth. You've forgotten what taste used to be. He asks you stories in exchange for food. You speak of Chang'an, of the dust storms in the Taklamakan, of the music in Samarkand, the ghost wells in Merv. He listens, wide-eyed, then says, "We only hear of silk and gold, never the blood." You smile. The blood is what pays for the silk. He laughs, but softly. Your path from Ray angles toward Baghdad, though the road is long and full of choices. You take the southern branch, skirting the ruins of Persepolis. Here, wild dogs howl at dusk. You walk faster. You travel by starlight now, timing your steps to the rhythm of a poem you half remember from your childhood. You don't know if it's Persian or Chinese anymore. You don't care. The words keep your feet moving. In one desert village, a child asks where you come from. You begin to answer, but pause. It's been so long. You don't know the right way to explain it anymore. East, you say finally. Very far east. He nods. That's where the moon rises. You nod back. Yes, that's where it all started. With moonlight and hope. But hope is harder to carry now. You reach the Tigris River by mid-autumn. The air is thick with flies and spice smoke. Baghdad glows on the horizon like a lantern suspended in oil. You camp on the eastern bank, waiting for a ferry to take you across. You stare at the water. It's wide, moving fast. It reminds you of time. In the dark, Ash sleeps with his head on your pack. The scribe sharpens his pen. Someone coughs into the night. You do not sleep. You watch the stars instead. You wonder what part of the Silk Road they belong to. Whether anyone else, somewhere on the same route, is looking up and wondering the same. You've made it far, but not far enough. Not yet. And the Silk Road, like the river, only flows one way. Tomorrow, you will cross it, and the journey will begin again. You cross into Baghdad as morning peels the mist off the river. The ferry is a wooden barge patched in places with tar and prayer. It creaks like an old man groaning in his sleep. You sit among crates of saffron, glass jars of honey, sacks of dates. No one speaks. The city grows slowly in front of you, its skyline a puzzle of domes, minarets, and palm trees. From a distance, it almost looks kind. But Baghdad is not kind. It is magnificent, yes, alive with noise and color and layers of history that shift under your feet like sand. But it is not kind. In the souks, men haggle over incense as if it were silver. Perfume sellers spill scent into the streets, jasmine, amber, frankincense, so thick your nose forgets what air is supposed to be. You see monkeys dancing to drums, scribes penning love letters for strangers, and booksellers who can recite entire volumes from memory. You see too many people pretending not to be hungry. Your coin pouch grows lighter. Silk still trades well, but so do lies. A merchant with clever fingers cheats you in broad daylight, swapping your woven scarf for one made of dyed cotton. You know at the moment he walks away, but you do nothing. What's one more loss on a road full of them? Ash vanishes on the second day. One moment he's trailing you through a spice alley, and the next, he's gone. You ask around. No one saw anything. You search for hours, days, sleeping in doorways, asking by name, by description, even by gesture. A boy with quiet eyes, good with animals. No one knows. Or maybe they do, and just don't care. This is Baghdad. It swallows what it wants. Eventually, you stop looking. You leave your knife behind on the step of a shrine, a gift, or an offering. You're not sure which. The road west takes you out of the city's dust and into its memory. You follow the Euphrates, moving slow, the way one does after a loss they don't want to name. Villages blur by. Sheep outnumber people. Dates rot on the ground. The path splits at Dura Europos. You take the Roman road. Here, the remains of empire lie beneath your feet. Mosaic floors half buried in weeds, crumbling aqueducts, inscriptions in languages no one reads anymore. At night, the wind moves through the stones and sounds almost like speech. Your companions are fewer now. Just a Greek healer, a Jewish weaver, and a North African widow whose name is Mira. She speaks little but sings when she spins thread, songs that rise like incense, slowly and without need for applause. You don't ask her why she's traveling. No one asks anyone that anymore. The question is too cruel. Food is harder to come by now. Trade slows. The weight of your journey shows in your posture, your skin, your eyes. You no longer look like a merchant. You look like someone chased by ghosts. When soldiers stop you at a checkpoint near Antioch, they search your bags and find only wool, almonds, and a single strip of indigo-dyed silk. You've kept it for no reason you understand. Is this all? The captain asks. You nod. What else is there? He lets you pass. No bribe, no delay, just a shrug. You're not worth robbing. And that, too, is part of the Silk Road. By the time you see the Mediterranean, your shoes are more holes than leather. Your feet bleed every morning. Mira gives you cloth to wrap them in. Soft as prayer, she says, pressing it into your hand. You weep when you see the sea, not from joy, but from confusion. It's too blue, too wide, too final. You didn't expect the road to end. Antioch is the western mouth of the Silk Road, though no one here calls it that. They speak of caravans and ships, of goods arriving from the east, but not of the miles in between. The city is loud with Roman pomp and Byzantine whispers. You hear Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Persian, all tangled into a song that makes you dizzy. Here, you trade your last scrap of silk for a hot meal. Bread thick with oil, olive sharp as memory, lamb so tender it almost dissolves. The merchant who feeds you doesn't ask for your story. He doesn't need to. He's seen the look before. Silk Road? He asks. You nod. He smiles, but it's sad. It eats people. You don't argue. You stay in Antioch for weeks. Not because you want to, but because your body won't go any farther. You sleep in a room above a bathhouse, sharing space with pigeons and the sound of dripping water. You wake often, unsure of where or who you are. Mira leaves one morning without a word. The healer dies in his sleep, his hands folded as if in prayer. The weaver goes to Jerusalem, chasing a dream of dye shops and better luck. You're alone again, but something is different now. You no longer feel pulled by destination. You've seen what lies along the great spine of the world. The deserts and mountains and markets and graves. You've watched emperors eat from gold and beggars drink from wells. You've slept beside thieves, monks, poets, and murderers. You've forgotten whole months. You've remembered things you never lived. One evening, you walk down to the harbor. Ships groan in their moorings. Crates of pepper and glassware thud against the docks. You sit beside a man repairing nets. He asks you no questions. He just works. You ask what he does with holes that are too big to fix. He shrugs. You tie the edges together and pretend it was always that shape. You nod. That makes sense. In your pouch are a few coins. Enough to sail. Enough to vanish. You don't use them. Instead, you write. You borrow ink and parchment from a scholar and begin to record what you remember. The scent of apricots in the Turpan market, the prayer flags and the Pamirs fluttering like hands, the girl in Bokhara who sang of rivers that never stopped. You write about Ash. You don't know if he's alive, but in your story, he is. You write slowly, each word like a footstep retraced. You write until the ink runs out, and then you keep writing in your mind. Because the truth is this, the Silk Road doesn't end in Antioch, or Constantinople, or Rome. It doesn't end at all. It keeps going in the people who walked it, in the languages that still carry its echoes, in the dreams of those who follow, thinking they will make history, not knowing history will make them, and in the long silence between the pages, where names are lost, and breath becomes memory. And roads, no matter how far they stretch, always lead you back to yourself.